Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll be talking about the 2003 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Charlize Theron won for her performance in Monster. But why did she beat fellow nominees Keisha Castle-Hughes, Diane Keaton, Samantha Morton, and Naomi Watts? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 76th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 2003. We'll be discussing how Charlize Theron won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is a very busy man, writer, podcaster, member of the International Film Society Critics and the North Texas Film Critics Association. He also hosts the podcast Target Audience. Welcome to the show for the first time, Ben Miller.
Hello! What a thrill! It's funny every time I want to be on a podcast. I'm like, how dorky can I be with what a thrill and who understands the reference? But I don't have to worry about this.
I understand you, Marcia Gay Harden.
Exactly. I don't even have to explain it. Like I just have to. Yeah. So it's such a pleasure to be on.
Yes.
What a fun year to talk about, and just the general idea. Like, it's so fun to be on a Oscar junkie podcast. Like
yes.
I don't get to geek out that much about Oscar stuff. And it's very nice to be able to do so.
Yes. Well, I hope you feel right at home here because we're going to probably be getting right into it.
Yes, we are.
For a long time.
Yes.
But before we talk 2003, Ben, let's just talk Best Actress as a category.
Yeah.
My first question, as I ask every guest, what would you say is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
My default always kind of goes to Elizabeth Taylor in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, just because sometimes you look at films and you're like, man, they're going too big. They're doing too much. And sometimes the too much, the too big works perfectly. And the too big, too much suits exactly what that movie is asking her to do. And she's in such control of the character. And it's so strange to watch a film like that and be like, she was like in her 30s. Like it was not
wild.
It's wild. She's playing a middle-aged woman so perfectly and has such this level of intensity and regret and all this there's so many layers to that film. And to have somebody like Elizabeth Taylor actually allow herself to give that performance and look the way she does and act the way she does. It's really a remarkable achievement. I kind of always stand by it as that's probably the best female performance I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's hard to argue. Yeah. Top 5 Best Actress win for me. I don't know how it's gonna all rank out when I get to the end of this, but she has always been in that top echelon for me.
Absolutely.
And remains that way. Just the comedy, all the just like romp stuff that she gets into, and the heavyweight dramatic stuff by the end, you're really kind of like devastated.
The most impressive thing about her is that she can give one of the all-time Best Actress performances and one of the worst Best Actress performances all within the same thing. Like Butterfield Date's so bad. and you're just like, you know what? Good for her. Like
good for her. Yeah, truly. Definitely another one of those where like the second win feels like maybe we should have just had that instead of like having that first win.
Yep.
If we knew what was coming, probably wouldn't have gone for it.
The reverse, Jessica Lange.
Yes.
give her the first one. We don't need to give her the second one. Jodie Foster is probably the best example of that. Even though I think she's good in The Accused. Like nobody's arguing the Silence of the Lambs win.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Well, my other question. Many heartbreaking losses in this category over the years, as I'm sure you know. So what would you say is your most heartbreaking Oscar loss at Best Actress?
I don't know how realistic it was to actually be a win. But I can't ever see Celia Johnson and not be like, how is this not a Best Actress winning performance? It's so
Yeah.
devastating and destructive to your soul. And I see that, and Brief Encounter is such a good movie that I don't think I've never heard of anybody going, Brief Encounter's okay. It's like
Yeah.
wasn't like in the top 10 of Sight and Sound a couple of years ago. Like that
Hmm.
was that
For a
that's
reason. Yeah.
that for a reason. That is a devastatingly great movie, and nobody does sad longing like Celia Johnson in that movie. It's
Those
she's
eyes. Yeah.
and I've never seen her in anything where I'm like, hey, Celia Johnson, cool. Like my in-laws were watching some random Christmas movie and she showed up and I was locked in. And sure enough, she was great. And it was
Yeah.
like, man, she very underutilized as an actress. And that is the most towering. You want to talk about the opposite of the going big, going small. That is the smallest, quietest, doing so much with silence performance.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you picked a classic pick because a lot of people do, things that are within their lifetime. I'm not going to assume age, but
yeah, I was
I appreciate the classic pick.
I was not born. I was not born in 46, so this is true. So yes, yeah, yeah. It's an incredible film. It's one of the top my favorite films ever, and that's a ridiculous performance.
David Lean's best.
Yes,
and that's saying a lot.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, great picks, both of those. So let's talk about this year at the Oscars. The 76th Academy Awards nominees were Keisha Castle-Hughes in Whale Rider, Diane Keaton in Something's Gotta Give, Samantha Morton in America, Charlize Theron in Monster, and Naomi Watts in 21 Grams, with the winner being Charlize Theron. So before we break these down, Ben, just curious your overall thoughts just from rewatching or watching this lineup over the past week.
It's so funny because the thing hanging over this entire lineup was Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings was everybody knew going into this ceremony is like, this is the coronation of Lord of the Rings, as long as Return of the King is not terrible, and it by all means was not. So it was kind of like, okay, we fill it out with all the Lord of the Rings stuff, and then we have to backfill with non-Lord of the Rings things. And the actress lineup is very. It's apparent that they were like, well, crap, we didn't think this through. They were kind of like there's how many of these? There's three lone nominees, and then Morton and Watts had only acting with it. Like it was not. What 21 Grams had 3 nominations, and that's the most of this entire category.
I think In America was the one that.
In America had 3.
Yeah.
Yes, excuse me. Yes. Yeah. So, but I mean, like 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. That's weird. Like,
not great, Bob.
It's not great. Actress, as of course, doing this series, you were very aware that is rampant across the Best Actress race. But I mean, this one seems particularly like, well, there are no women in Lord of the Rings that anybody really can point to. So we have to figure something out else. And I don't think it's necessary. I look at it as like, this is a good lineup, but I also think there are a lot of missed opportunities.
Sure. Yes. And many, many, many snubs that people
many
love to talk
snubs.
About.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, this is a fascinating lineup to look back on, because it is definitely one of those years where the winner was a foregone conclusion for months.
Yep.
And the runner-up was probably a distant runner-up, which I'm sure we'll get to.
Yep.
But, once Monster came out and got all that critic support, it was like, it's over.
But
then you have things
like... Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Diane Keaton returning with this Nancy Meyers comedy that probably wasn't the kind of thing that like automatically had Oscar buzz going into it necessarily. You have Naomi Watts in 21 Grams, this really kind of intense performance that didn't get in everywhere, but then there was this double whammy surprise of Keisha Castle-Hughes and Samantha Morton, neither of them nominated for Golden Globes. Keisha Castle-Hughes was nominated for SAG, but she was nominated in supporting. Like, it really
insanity
feels to
by
me
the
like
way.
Yeah, like imagine just like watching that on nomination morning, which a lot of people did who are listening to this. To be fair, it was only 20 years ago, but it feels like one of those years where, because like the top 1 or 2 contenders here were probably very clear, that there was just a lot of wiggle room for the other 3 slots, and I think that's very exciting.
Yeah,
honestly,
I like the idea of there have been years. I think like the last 2, like I think it was Best Actor this last year. Like there was, everybody knew the 5. There was no questioning. There's like, even of the 5, it's like, how many contenders for these 5 spots? 6. Like, and even that 6th is not really that, like, that's not very fun. But you posted the video on Twitter of the nomination morning, and people going, "Whoa!" And it was funny just seeing like the reactions, and I was really shocked at the reaction to Naomi Watts' nomination. Like
Yeah, a
people were
huge,
pumped, huge
yeah,
huge roar, and I'm like,
biggest
okay,
one. Yeah,
yeah. I was like,
yeah.
oh, a lot of 21 Graham heads in the audience. It's like, whatever. But I mean, yeah,
Right.
I always like a nomination morning that keeps you on your toes. And this certainly was
Yeah.
that.
I think Sigourney Weaver, who was announcing it,
Yeah.
said at the beginning, "Hold on to your hats," and yeah,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
That's a fair warning.
Yeah.
But just from watching these all this week, I don't know about you, but it felt to me like watching like an Independent Spirit Award
Oh
lineup
man.
more than like an Oscar lineup. You know?
Yeah, and it's so funny because whenever we talked about this, I was like, okay, I'll watch all these, and then unfortunately, I went Monster 21 Grams in America in a row, and I'm like, boy, I'm bummed. I was just
Oh
like,
God.
I was just like, oh, like so,
Yikes.
and then thank God for the breath of fresh air of something's got to give. You're like, oh, something to lift my spirits, and Whale
Yes.
Rider. But at the same time,
Yeah.
Whale Rider's not exactly the most uplifting thing the whole time. Like it's a pretty
Right.
like it's that early 2000s of like, okay, what is indie, and coming out
Mm-hmm.
of like early Miramax times and before we get to like indie kind of being the dominant thing. Like it's that in between of
Right.
indie means gritty and gross and with like kind of digital, but it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's an in
Playing
between.
with like color filters and everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
All that stuff.
yeah. Everything
Yeah.
everything has a that it's also like a reaction to Traffic. It's like Traffic from the year
Yeah.
before. Everybody like, oh, I kind of want
Exactly.
to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody copying.
Yeah.
It's the natural.
Mm-hmm.
It's the natural evolution of things that are successful.
Yeah. So it's kind of just like you're seeing an Independent Spirit lineup, and Diane Keaton also
Hmm.
snuck in there too. That's kind of
Right.
like a total like apple in a barrel of oranges. But anyway, yeah, I also think it's exciting that we have 3 of the 5 films directed by women,
Yeah.
which I've been keeping track and just to see like how many Best Actress nominees have been directed by women. Not many,
Yeah.
first of all, leading up to this. But this is the first time we've even had more than one film directed by a woman in this lineup. So I think that's pretty cool.
And in America, co-written by a pair of women with their father.
Yeah,
So I was like, hey,
yeah,
that's
true.
nice. Like, and
Yeah,
then and I was and it's funny because you said that. I'm like, are there women involved? And I was like, oh wait, 21 Grams. It's the most male thing in the history of the world.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
uh,
it's refreshing. Like this, and this is the year of Lost in Translation too. Like
exactly.
it was
Yeah.
that wasn't even the lady movie that everybody thought of. What at
Hmm.
the time, Sofia Coppola, what she was the fourth woman nominated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
first American woman
first
too.
American, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So after
Yeah.
Campion and
Lena Wertmuller. Yeah.
Wortmuller, thank you. Yes, yeah. So that makes sense.
Yes. So weird year, a lot of unconventional stuff happening, but interested to explore how we got here. So shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, well, we'll start with one of those unexpected surprises. Keisha Castle-Hughes in Whale Rider. So this is one you don't see every day. Keisha Castle-Hughes getting this Oscar nomination at the age of 13. She made history as the youngest Best Actress nominee of all time by that point. That has since been broken by Quvenzhané Wallis, but for a period of time, she was the only child actress to be nominated in this category. So to introduce her, Keisha was born in Western Australia, and she grew up in New Zealand. Her mother is Maori, and her father is Anglo-Australian, which makes her also the rare Indigenous actress nominated. And Whale Rider is her debut performance on film. There were over 10,000 children who auditioned for the film, and she was chosen. This is an indie film set in New Zealand, and it tells the story of Paikea, played by Keisha, a 12-year-old Maori girl whose mother died in childbirth and whose father leaves and puts her in the care of her grandparents. So in this village, there's a tradition of the whale rider, also named Paikea, who is their beloved ancestor, and the firstborn son of the village leader, descended from Paikea, is selected to be the new leader, but Paikea's twin brother died, this Paikea, I should say, and with Paikea being female, she cannot assume the title, but she takes great strides to prove herself and prove that she's worthy of the title while facing some sexism within the village.
Some.
So a smidge. But let's get into this here.
Yes.
Keisha Castle-Hughes, like I said, very unique nominee. Thoughts on Keisha and her performance in Whale Rider?
It's always kind of fun to have these kind of out of nowhere nominees, and
Yeah.
like she was literally out of nowhere, and it was the bright shining star that shot into the sky, and everybody went, that was cool, and then we never saw it again. But it has this nice little like time and place thing. It's funny whenever you have like a situation like this, and you have this movie and this performance and this breakthrough, and you're like, well, this girl's going to be, they're going to propel her into the next thing. And it was actually Nikki Caro that kind of took all the smoke. It's interesting that the female director was the one elevated compared to the star. On this rewatch, I really was taken by how Caro and Castle-Hughes just refuses to make Pie in any way precocious. Like, she is not the type of, when you think child actor in a movie, you always think of cutesy acting above their age and
theater
that
kid energy.
Theater kid energy. And that's the exact opposite of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's subdued. It's okay. What are you going to, if you put this child in this situation where they're essentially an afterthought their entire lives or overlooked, and what's the personality of that kid going to be? It's going to be pretty subdued. And that's what Castle-Hughes brings. The rawness of her performance is obviously a feature, because, like you said, if you have theater kids stuff, they come in there and they're going way too hard and it messes with everything. Instead, Castle-Hughes underplays absolutely everything she could possibly underplay. And that ability, even like her voiceover is like whisper toned, and it all fits exactly what this film needs it to be. As far it's not meant to be like grand things out, like affecting the world. It's like, this is a cultural thing, telling a very cultural story in a very specific way, and how the modern times are over, the balancing modern and the old ways and all this kind of stuff. And her performance is such that if it goes too big, it throws the tone off the movie. I'm not sure how you can go smaller than what she did, but at the same time, it's exactly what the film needs it to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is actually one of the nominees I hadn't seen before. So was always conscious of her nomination and how interesting it was to see someone so young in this category. But now, having watched it, this is such a cool nomination.
It is.
Like, I really found myself very impressed, not just by her performance, but just like the Academy for not only nominating her, but nominating her in the right category. Because sometimes they don't follow with, like, studios campaign people a certain way, and that's not exactly indicative of how they actually are in the film. And in this case, they did it.
It would have been one of the most egregious category fraud things ever. Like, we're talking Timothy Hutton, Tatum O'Neal things, like Tatum O'Neal being the prime example of this. She's probably in 80% of the movie, 85% of the movie. Like,
she is the movie.
She's the movie. So,
she's the titular role.
Let's be honest. The titular role. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's no escaping, like, outside of her being a child. There's like, well, she's supporting. I'm like, in what world? Like, there's it doesn't make the slightest bit of sense. But I mean, whatever. I'm glad. I'm with you. I'm glad the Academy got it right, and I'm really glad this nomination exists. Like you said, it's not something that she was the youngest nominee ever at the time, and not only was she the youngest nominee ever by like 7 years. Like
Isabella Gianni
was 20
last time.
Yeah, that's
20.
That's remarkable. Like,
yeah,
and having that, it's the perfect time, perfect person. And I always wonder, like, was there a path for Keisha Castle-Hughes to be something else than what she is? Or maybe she didn't have any desire to be. Like, I'm not about to say it's like she was pigeonholed, and the thing around the nativity story coming out and her getting pregnant whenever she's playing the Virgin Mary is always fun. But I mean, like, but it's always really, she's such a talent. Like, she has this magnetism in the movie that I really didn't remember the first time watching it. I remember just underplaying it the whole time. And
Right.
this time it was like, man, when she's pretty subdued the whole time, but there are some times when she really gets to like be bright and sunny, and I'm just
Hmm.
like, man, there's something there. There's a
Yeah.
morsel of something that could be more than what she was allowed to do.
I agree. Yeah. What I first notice is just her ease on screen. Like
Yes.
she is just so comfortable.
Yep.
And yes, to your point, I appreciate that we get very little of the classic child star mugging for the camera
Mm-hmm.
type thing. She is this very introverted person. She's very quiet, but she also, I think, as a character, is confident in her abilities and what, like, what her destiny is.
Yeah.
There's never a question like where this is going. And the story, I think, is pretty predictable that
Yeah.
she is going to prove the elders wrong and have this, communication with the whales and everything and making her the chosen one sort
Yeah.
of thing. She
Yeah.
is the new leader. So for me, it is just about like watching the journey
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think she is just able to chart that with this sort of quiet dignity to
Yeah.
her and this tenacity that feels very down to earth and realistic. There's no whiny moment of her throwing a tantrum or like boasting about how she's the chosen one or
Yeah.
anything. It's
Yeah.
just like, I'm just going to keep proving myself time and time again until, they have no choice but to accept me.
And even this like blind child faith of like every time her grandfather does something terrible or says something terrible to her, somebody's like, it's like, oh, he's like, oh no, he didn't mean it. And he didn't like
Right.
it's almost like the naivety of a child. Like it was like you don't know better than this guy is terrible to you at times, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't care because you love him. And the chemistry she has with both her grandmother, Cliff Curtis when he pops in, the uncle, like it's always like it feels like it feels like a family. Like they all
Yeah.
feel like a credit to Carol because she really everybody is indigenous. It's not like I'll throw the random white person in here,
Right.
and like it's everybody is suits what they're needing to be, and it feels like the right people. Like having Vicky Houghton, who plays Nanny, who's awesome in this movie. She
Yeah.
doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Like she's probably just some random lady they found on the island and be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
can you do this?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna give this awesome performance as this grandmother, though." It's like, "Yeah, yeah, cool, like whatever," and then never be seen again. But I mean, it's that level of authenticity with it. Like it just suits what Castle Hughes brings. It's you would expect somebody like with a little bit of preparation at least to be like, I have a little bit of understanding of the craft of film and all this kind of stuff. But maybe Carol didn't want that. Maybe that's why she took her so long to find somebody. You have to find somebody who wants to be in this but doesn't want it too hard. And I guess that's probably why
Exactly.
it took so long to get.
Yeah. And I also think, it's this very nuanced thing that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of hard to explain, but there is this sensibility I think that kids have, especially at this age, like preteens, where something will happen to them, someone will say something that could be harsh,
Yeah.
but they don't fully process it and they
Yeah.
just sort of go about their business and sort of internalize it in this very simple way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she really taps into that very specific kid like thing, like when she's like fixing the motor at one point
Yeah.
and her grandfather gets mad at her and she just like is silently processing it and just kind of keeps on going anyway. Or like when her grandfather says also at one point that he just doesn't really want her around and
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't want the responsibility of taking care of her, all this stuff. So she goes to very briefly go to live with her father, even
Yeah.
though, that doesn't actually pan out.
Yeah.
And she has this conversation with her father and just is sitting there very simply saying, like, he didn't mean it
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you also are seeing some of the tears coming up and she's like fully starting to process it now that she's thinking about it more. Like that feels very sensitive and
Yeah.
like truly lived in what she's doing there.
Yeah, and I always think of it like, okay, you remake this movie and you make a guy do it, and a guy who is like a hired gun ad director. There's
Yeah.
definitely 1000% a scene near the end where she would burst in and yell at her grandfather and be this big long screaming soliloquy. And you're
Yeah.
just like, that never happens. She never confronts her grandfather. She never, the entire movie. She's just,
Yeah.
he just realizes the error of his ways through other people or her actions. It's not, it's not a this is the answer. I'm going to throw a face. Now you realize this, right? It's gradual. And the synergy between the people and the ocean, the wildlife, and all that kind of stuff. It's a really, it's not the kind of film that gets made with this amount of subtlety. They always go harder because you always want something. Like, I don't remember the Oscar clip they ran for Keisha Castle-Hughes. I assume it's her crying speech, but
It wasn't. No.
what was it?
It was the scene I just mentioned
Oh,
where
really?
she's just talking to her father. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a good one. That's a good
Yeah.
Oscar clip. Like, I would expect it to be her speech when she has all the makeup on and all
Right.
the, but I mean, like, that's as showy as it gets. It's
Hmm.
not the kind of performance that gets awarded that much. And the combination of right category, the age, the kind of performance, the kind of film, the indiness of it all, it is a little bit of a shock that this ever happened.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah,
So I love it for that reason.
I
Exactly.
agree.
And I love when she is like trying to learn from her grandfather how to be a leader and to fight with the stick and everything. And
Yeah,
she just has this stubbornness and this sort of quiet defiance sort of thing where she tries to sit in on the lesson, but like her grandfather wants her to sit in the back and she's
yeah,
refusing. So he yells at her in front of everyone.
yep,
And so, that doesn't stop her. It's like she just goes off and is spying on this lesson and just trying to maneuver with the stick out of sight. I think that sort of willfulness is very compelling, where it could have been a little cheesy or annoying or just like a generic sort of girl power type of thing.
yeah.
But
And
it feels authentic.
that
Yeah.
that one scene you're talking about where she refuses to go to the back or refuses to leave, like
Hmm.
she doesn't mug, she doesn't
Right.
she doesn't cross her arms or anything like that. She just sits there, stone faced, just going, I'm not moving, I'm not moving, I'm not
Yeah.
moving, and eventually she moves, and then again, it's it's so underplayed, but it's so right for, like you said, it's an introverted character. It's not one that's going to be outwardly this defiant, and it's so unconventionally Hollywood. And that's
Yeah.
the thing that makes it so specifically great.
Yeah, obviously over time she is proving that she is more than qualified and like destined to be their leader. She finds the whale tooth that no one else could find at the bottom
Yep.
of the ocean. Again, just like that quiet confidence I love. And then, yes, to speak to the speech at the recital, I
Yeah.
do think that is her most obvious sort of acting moment that she
Yes.
gets in the film, but she makes the absolute most of it, where she is making a speech that's dedicated to her grandfather, but he didn't show up. And just the moment she has that like catch in her throat
Yeah.
when she's reading the speech and saying grandfather, I think is so well done. And then her like soldiering on with it. You can feel her heart breaking because she wants nothing more than her grandfather's respect, and he is not giving her that in return,
It's
and you really feel for her.
and it's not the little glimpses into everybody else's life is really interesting too, because you're
Yeah,
like the absentee father is not necessarily the thing that is the problem. It's funny, like
good point.
he leaves. He's never really there, and she's never like, oh, I need the respect of my dad, or I love, she obviously loves her dad, and he's sweet enough, but he's not there. But that doesn't matter. The guy who's there is the problem. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really, and then you get that little insight of that one kid with the dad who was in jail and he gets out and he doesn't spend any time with him, and you're like, okay, this is more of like it's Carol kind of slightly going like, oh, this is a systemic problem. This is not just it's not just the one. This is not an isolated thing. Like, and it's kind of that speaking to that, but at the same time, like even the guys who are around, how much, even the guy who is there all the time, like the grandfather, what does that time mean? And how empty is that time? Like, oh, we have it here, but oh, by the way, I've been telling you your entire life that I wish you weren't here and your dead brother was. It's like you're a
Yeah.
girl and useless. I believe he said before. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's insanity that she has any sort of sane at her own sanity. It's a shock that she ever made it this far. It really speaks to like the patriarchal society of it all, and like, well, who cares? Like, and the even further of like the grandfather, like obviously wanting Cliff Curtis to stay around and be the chief, but the other guy's there. Like he actually seems pretty like whenever the whales are beached, like he's going around
Mm.
doing like he's kind of taking charge, like captaincy and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, what he was right there too. Like there's more to it than this. It's not just the levels of this is obviously what it is, and you know the one relationship. This is a systemic problem, and her still having that love for him, that undeniable like I don't want to love this guy, but I can't help it.
Yeah. I think that is very real and very sensitively portrayed in
Yes.
that way. All
Yes.
the complexities of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then with that whales being beached, that whole
Yeah.
scene, everyone trying to get them back in the ocean. Of course, she is communicating with the big one
Yep.
and rides it into the ocean, which I think is a lovely scene. I think maybe a little dated in the way we have like a little bit of slow motion there going on, very like early 2000 stuff there, but she does communicate this soulfulness
Yeah.
that really works for the scene. Like she really feels not precocious, but
Yep.
way older than her age in how she is so spiritually connected in this
Wise.
natural way. Yeah.
Wise would be the probably the right
Yeah.
word. And yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, you'd be like, oh, well, you get the slow mo and all that kind of stuff, and you're like, and then you're like, how did they find her in the ocean? And you can
Yeah.
talk like all that kind of stuff. It kind of doesn't really matter. It's all
It
about
doesn't.
it's
No.
it's
The emotional part
it's
of
all
it
about the
is what
emotional.
matters. Yeah.
You say like,
Yeah.
oh, a vibes movie, emotional vibes. This is all
Mm-hmm.
like from the beginning. It's like, okay, we're gonna kill this mother and this baby right off the jump,
Yeah.
and this is the tone we're keeping. But at the same
Mm.
time, it's not like a downer tone. It's a weird.
It's not 21
It's
grams.
not
Yeah.
21 grams. You're right. It's much more optimistic,
Oh,
like
yeah.
naturally downer.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
Right.
odd balance to keep.
Yeah. But what a great debut performance. Like
Absolutely.
truly one of the best of a child leading her first movie that I've seen maybe ever. I don't know.
It probably gets lost to the annals of the other ones just because she never had the career past this.
Exactly.
And like
Yeah.
you look at the other things, it's like, well, you can hang your hat on other things, and people have gone to greater things. And what's the best debut performance? And you're like, whatever that is, and you can Marley Matlin or even like that's probably a pretty good. I was trying to think of another example of her, and I couldn't really come up with one. Like it's just kind of she's there, she does it, and she doesn't do anything of any ever essentially. Like
Mm-hmm.
she even I forgot she was in Game of Thrones. Like like
Yeah.
she's just
Well, she is now on a CBS procedural,
well,
in case you're wondering where she
good
is.
for you. Get that bag, girl. Like
Yeah.
by all means.
She's been on since 2020. She's a series regular. She's like the one who like does the computer stuff.
Oh, good
She's
for
like, I'm in.
good
That sort of thing.
good for her.
Like that's her role.
Good for
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yep. FBI most wanted. Anyway.
Jeez. Well,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean,
But
best success to you, Keisha Castle-Hughes. Hopefully,
of course,
she's younger than I am.
she's still young.
She's not
Yeah.
old. She's in her 30s. Like
Yeah.
she's 34. Yeah, so I mean, like
Yeah.
by all means, she still has she if she wants to do stuff, let her do
Mhm.
stuff. So it's be interesting to see if she still has more to give.
Yeah. I think she does.
Mhm.
So, all right. Let's move on to our next nominee. Someone on the opposite end of the career spectrum,
Yep.
perhaps. Diane Keaton in Something's Gotta Give. So Diane Keaton, our only returning Best Actress nominee of this group. She gets her requisite once-a-decade nomination here. And sadly, it is still her most recent nomination. So the last time we talked about Diane was for Marvin's Room in 1996. This is 7 years later. So in between, she does not have too many highs, unfortunately, even though she's keeping pretty busy. She has The Only Thrill. She has The Other Sister. She stars in and directs the film Hanging Up in 2000. None of them being very well received. Town and Country in 2001 is one of the biggest box office flops in history. She does TV movies. Basically, nothing's really hitting.
Yep.
You're right. So until we get to 2003 with Something's Gotta Give, directed by Nancy Meyers, and she finally connects again and gets pretty like widespread acclaim for her performance. So Something's Gotta Give, a romantic comedy about this womanizing music producer, Harry, played by Jack Nicholson, who only dates younger women, and he goes with his newest girlfriend, Marin, played by Amanda Peet, to Marin's mother's place in the Hamptons, assuming it'll be free for the weekend, but her mother, Erica, Diane Keaton, arrives, which creates an awkward moment. Harry soon has a heart attack and he agrees to stay at the house to recuperate, and he's attended to by Erica, who is, we learn, a acclaimed playwright, and the two of them go from not being interested in each other whatsoever to falling madly in love. But complications ensue from there, which I'm sure we'll get into, like when she gets into a relationship with this younger doctor, Julian Mercer, played by Keanu Reeves. So many, many twists and turns to this movie, a surprising amount, but this is really, I guess, our only fun performance to talk about in this lineup.
Yeah.
She is the veteran also of this group. So yeah, thoughts on Diane overall and her performance here.
I've always been kind of torn on Diane Keaton as far as an actual performer. Like it's one of those, like you see Annie Hall and you're like, well, that's kind of undeniable. And then you see, but all the while, like the other stuff diving into Oscar completism, you really get into like stuff you didn't realize you saw, you knew she was in, and then you see it and you're like, meh, she's fine. Like she seems like she only gives either towering unequal performances or things that I don't ever remember she did. And it's kind of funny that way. It's so funny, like you said, with she gets that nomination for Marvin's Room and then it's just like so under the radar. And this movie is under the radar. And it's like this movie comes and it just kind of blows everyone away. I worked at a movie theater at the time when this movie came out, and this was a behemoth. Like you could not get like it. There were people love this movie. They kept coming back to it, and this is a really interesting film as far as like where she is in her career, bringing all that experience added to Nancy Meyers in her career and her experience and their relationship and Keaton and Nicholson's relationship. There's a lot of elements coming forth. It's kind of the perfect storm for the greatness of this film, because Keaton is great. And I will fully admit, I was the cynic back whenever I was 16 when this movie came out, 17.
Yeah.
Like I was like, nope, sucks, rom-com, blah, 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 blah. Diane Keaton's not all that great. I don't get the acclaim. Da 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 da. I was just a cynical young a-hole, and now rewatching it, I'm like, oh, I was just wrong. I was just completely wrong. And it's a delightful movie with a lot of layers, and Diane Keaton's micro just expressions throughout this movie are a work of art. Somebody says something and she does like an awkward like smile and a frown to actually talking. Like it's ingenious. I always think, what actors can do what no other actor would, what actor would make a choice that no other actor would make? And every choice that Diane Keaton makes in this movie is one that she would make and she alone would make. And it's so perfect for the role and the film. And it's a comedy performance that is 1000% comedic. She has a 10-minute stretch where she scream cries, and
tour de force
with dream
Truly.
force. Yeah, it's that tour de force, like you said. And it's even the more dramatic elements. They're few and far between, but it's just it's such a towering performance of experience and comedy, and it's hard to put into words how good she is in this film.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big Nancy Meyers fan. I love her very idiosyncratic sort of visual aesthetic, and even like the storytelling device that she has, when her films might have like a formulaic feel on the surface, but they're actually like surprisingly complicated, and she has like 6 acts per movie, not 3. So like she's such a fascinating director to me, and I think Something's Gotta Give is one of her best.
I think it is her best.
Where everything I think is working perfectly in sync. Fantastic cast. I love Jack's performance. I
Yeah.
love Keanu Reeves as like the other man in the love triangle. Frances McDormand shows up here
Yes.
as Erica's sister, which is hilarious. Just a fun hangout movie, which, speaking to your point, that's probably what made people go back to the cinema, just to like hang out with these people again. And yeah, Diane is an actress, like, you're not going to go to her for the transformation.
Nope.
You know, she has a very specific star persona,
Mhm.
especially by this point in her career, where she's really just embracing her, you know, Diane Keatonisms and the pantsuits and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Like, she's just going to be her. And I think Nancy Meyers just uses that persona really beautifully here.
Yeah.
Also in a character that feels to me loosely based on Nancy herself,
Yeah.
as like this writer who's writing stories about older women and has like this perspective on how men, you know, how they relate to women and vice versa. Like, it feels a little bit like she's playing some version of Nancy in a
Yeah.
way, but in her very specific neurotic Diane Keaton way.
Yeah.
Like, she's really able to do so much, I think, with this role, where she is hilarious. She's also heartbreaking in moments. She has that incredible montage, and she just also is, I think, digging into the vulnerability of being an older woman who feels outcast, even though like she's only in her 50s, I think, by
Yeah.
this point. But the way things are, like, especially in the early 2000s, which I remember, like, messaging in the media and all that was horrific in terms of older women,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about I believe, especially in 2003, you're like, well, what's the word that was used the most with Diane Keaton's performance? Brave, because she had the
Brave.
audacity to be nude for a fraction of a second. And you're just like,
Right.
so like, it's
I
like,
know.
and it's so dumb in hindsight. It's so brief, and she still looks like Diane Keaton. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, it's such a silly thing to have that kind of pushback from it. I'm sure she had plenty of pushback from it in the media tours that she was going through, of
Oh, yeah.
the you know, how brave. Like, the really interesting thing about it is, like you said, it's kind of like whenever Hugh Grant pops up in Four Weddings and a Funeral, and you're like, he's just being Hugh Grant. It's like he actually made that, and then did
Right.
that the rest of his career. And you kind of see the shift in what Diane Keaton does in this movie, and then she's been doing that ever since then. Like, she's essentially
Right.
played this character for the last 20
Yeah.
years. And
Very much so.
but this is kind of a shift as far as like, okay, I have to shift into this mother. I'm now a mother of Amanda Peet. Like, it has to be feasible to be Amanda Peet's mother, which is on paper a little bit silly, but at the same
Yeah.
time, the comfort with everything, like, there, like you said, I really like what you said about the aesthetic of what Nancy Meyers brings. Everything's so beige and
Yes.
pearl colored,
Off-white.
off white.
Yes.
Like, it's
Yes.
every like, she just goes to Home Depot, sees, okay, I don't want white, I want every shade of that before beige, and just everything.
Right.
She takes it and throws it in a movie. But I mean,
Mhm.
you see all the things that she does really, really well. Her insecurity, but
Mm.
it's really silly, kind of, sometimes, the insecurity of it all. Like, you have Keanu Reeves obviously crushing on you, and you're just like, well,
Mm.
this isn't obviously the case. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and we're not talking about, you know, John Wick Keanu Reeves. We're talking like, oh, 03 Keanu Reeves. I watched this with my wife, and she goes, woo, just as soon as he walks on. So it's that
He's
level.
a smoke show.
Smoke
in
show, yeah.
this. Yeah.
But everybody's pretty. This is what
Yeah,
this is what Nancy
everyone's
Meyers
pretty.
does. She has
Yeah.
pretty people. I appreciate what she does. Like, it's like watching a slapstick comedy from the 40s, where people don't have real jobs; they have fake jobs. Like, what do you
Yes.
do? I'm a playwright, or I own a record company. It's like, I'm a
Mhm.
I'm a wildly successful lesbian women's historian at this, or
Yes.
all these kind of things. Not real thing. I work at where does Amanda P work? She works at an auction house. Yeah, so I mean,
Mm.
like, and that distorted sense of reality is really suited to what Keaton brings, because she has this
Yeah.
she has a level of where you can be really grounded, but also sophisticated and really intelligent, and it's not
Mhm.
alienating. Like, the prosperity porn of it all doesn't feel like it should be something that you should be pushing up against. It's just like, yeah, she's good. She's really good at what she does, and she deserves this.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that is what some of the messaging of that is what resonates with people,
Yeah.
especially older women
Yeah.
who want to keep going back to her films.
Yeah.
Because when I say want, it's like it's been a while.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not sure what happened with that Netflix deal that she had, a few years ago. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think she just does a beautiful job of balancing that comedy and all that nervous energy with the vulnerability of like quite a few times in the film saying how much it hurts to love someone
Yeah.
who isn't able to express that same love back.
Yeah.
In the case of Harry. And those are the moments where it's like, this isn't just a silly disposable rom-com for like the older folks.
Yeah.
Like this is really trying to get at some pretty powerful themes about aging and opening yourself up to love after middle age, and to not have that feel like condescending or too cutesy.
Yeah.
Like I honestly think some of the films in like the book club cinema universe tend to be a little cutesy with that in a way that's like a little I don't know,
patronizing.
It feels slightly condescending.
Yeah.
Patronizing to me. But this treats it with respect.
I really like you said how she doesn't have 3 acts, she has 6 acts. And after the 3 acts, the movie could have been over. Like her and Jack like have a big like romantic kiss, and then there's like, okay, well, hour 10 into this movie, this thing could be done. And it's halfway and you're like, okay,
right.
Like, but that's she doesn't want to end it there. She wants it to have the layers of complexity to be like, okay, we have to have the down and then the further down and then the up, the down. Like she's not willing to have it as cookie cutter as it is. Like it's really kind of, it's very different for a romantic comedy to have just we're not just going to have it, obviously the up, the love, the down, the recovery, and then we're done. Like we're going to have ebbs and flows to this, and Keaton's ability to go up and down with all of it and be able to adjust to it is a big power of this film. Like I remember even like it's kind of shocking how like you have Jack Nicholson, one of the all-time men. Like you think of like I watching this movie, I kept expecting him to be way more misogynist, essentially. Like but that's
like the as good as it gets version.
The as good as it gets version, yes.
Yeah.
And
sure.
But that's dumbed down too. Like his respect, I would assume, for Keaton and Myers is such that he's allowed to be way more vulnerable for a guy like him at this point in his career. He's already 3 Oscars in. He's not like trying to prove anything. Everything kind of seems just very respectful to what Myers wants to do. And even Nicholson, like 3 years later, Nicholson tries to ruin The Departed, and then he comes in and does this. But 3 years before, he gives Nancy Myers the respect that he has, and his chemistry with Keaton is something I really didn't expect to. Like, yeah, the prickliness between it, but when it gets sweet, it gets really sweet.
It does.
Yeah.
Also, we should mention this is a reunion for the two of them with Reds.
Yeah.
Way back in the day, so there is a history there, which I do think you feel that.
Yes,
I do.
Yeah, I was telling my wife, and I was like, the persona of Jack Nicholson in the 70s and 80s, and the persona of Diane Keaton in the 70s and 80s, you would think they would hate each other. Like on paper, it shouldn't work, but they apparently have this respect for each other, and it's a lovely. It's a lovely ballet they keep with. Like it's the picnics on the beach and the comfort and that level of just their sex scene is really fun and funny and all these kind of things, and that should have been Diane's Oscar clip, her reacting to the sex scene, and it's like just like, do we need to take your blood pressure, and then all these kind of things. So she knows when to go big, she knows when to keep it quiet, she knows when to turn the neuroses up and turn it down and settle into everything. It's really masterful.
Their walk on the beach, I think, is very charming. A little awkward at first, but like there's this sort of burgeoning connection there that's happening that's just really fun to watch, especially with how much her laughter kind of like is breaking the tension. Like she laughs a lot in the film, which I think I appreciate. Just like, I don't know how often we see that kind of thing. Something with rom-coms like this, there's sometimes like a forced sense of fun. that times that is like we're really trying to like make the audience have fun and therefore they'll like my movie.
Yeah.
But like it really feels like the two of them are bonding in an authentic way.
Yeah.
Where like when they're like admitting they looked each other up on the internet and
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
like older people kind of humor stuff, I eat it up.
Yeah, and it's not too like it's not people trying to relive the younger days. Like
Yeah,
with their
good
relationship.
point.
Like it's
Yeah.
they know where they are. They know this association, and it's one of those like, yeah, like you said, I like the non-field forced of the having fun, because you can tell everybody is very on board with doing this. Like everybody
Mm-hmm.
is having a lot of fun doing it. And there's an early scene, I think, whenever Jack's at the hospital and he's all drugged and he falls on Diane Keaton, and she is trying her absolute best not to break on camera. And
Yeah.
she doesn't do a very good job of not doing it. But you're like, okay, well, okay. So I feel the vibes of like everybody is enjoying making this. This is not
Yeah.
a this is not a paycheck role, even though I'm sure they got paid plenty. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's not one where this is not a studio comedy where they show up, do it, and then leave. Everybody seems to be really enjoying it, and it's a very kind of hangout cinema again. Like it's just
It is.
it's a lot of kitchen, a lot of making eggs in kitchens, and want to make
Mm.
pancakes. And it's like, yes, let's make this do this romantic thing in the middle of the night, and that level of comfort
Yes.
really turns like with that, and that entire scene is one of my favorite Keaton moments when she's
Me too.
making pancakes. The disappointment when Amanda Peet comes in, and all that, it's so great.
Yeah.
Like just
Mm-hmm.
that, talk about that microaggressions, the micro expression, excuse me. It's the the back and forth on her
Right.
face without actually saying what
Mm-hmm.
the emotions are. It's exquisite.
Yeah. That whole like pajama party I think
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
adorable. But it does take this nice sort of poignant turn, I think, when he like is comparing her to a painting you hang over a fireplace and calling her flinty and impervious. But that
They invent words for women like you. That's an
yeah,
incredibly romantic line.
I know, but like that once her walls come down
Yeah.
is what he's describing.
Yeah.
There's nothing more thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
And she seems genuinely moved to be kind of seen in that way. And she says, I can't tell if you hate me or you're the only person who ever got me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is really sweet and vulnerable and could have been awkward, cheesy line delivery, but she really sells that in a genuine way, I think,
Yeah.
of feeling seen, because she's so used to being like a wallflower, or like even when the scene with Keanu Reeves when he's like flirting up a storm with her at the
Yeah.
hospital,
Yeah.
and all she can really say is like, oh, you should date my daughter, essentially. Like that's she's just like it's passing it off to her,
Yeah.
but it's like, no, you're the one who has a connection here.
Yeah.
So, just that like opening up to being like, oh, I am still a sexual being in a
Yeah.
way. Like that's
And it even, the script, the film is aware of this, talking about, the metaphorical and the literal cutting of of a
oh my
turtleneck.
God.
Like you're just like,
Yes.
it's like, well, it's like we could have been a little more subtle with that, but I mean, like it's
Sure.
still like, it's like, okay, this is not the most subtle film, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
like it is. It's kind of, and it kind of speaks to like the Keaton persona of like she's buttoned up, she's pantsuits is the thing. Like it's not,
Yeah.
you don't think of her as voluptuous. You don't think of her in that way. She's much more of she's the button down type, and she's the stereotypical like quote unquote feminist woman. And that kind of like, well, what that woman still has desires, like you said. What
Mm-hmm.
how do we bring those walls down? I also really like what you said is like the do you hate me or are you the only one who gets me, like that. There's so many rom-coms of people who hate each other who eventually fall in love, but
Right.
they don't necessarily like hate each other off the bat. It's just a bad start for an obvious reason. and
Mm-hmm.
and then those little things in between about like her conversation with Amanda Peet about like, well, you've had sex with him. It's like, no, we actually haven't. And she kind of perks up a little bit. Like it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, like maybe it's like she already has that in her mind. It's not something like it's
Oh yeah.
it's not a it was never like, oh, I hate this guy, this will never happen. It's like, well, he's a he's got a quality, and they can't
Mm-hmm.
really put their finger on it, and that vulnerability from both of them in different kinds of vulnerability is really refreshing to see in a like vulnerability is something you don't really see in film much. It's hard to
Yeah.
show in a real way without feeling forced. And this movie does it in a real way.
I think people nowadays are afraid of the cringe.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Like the scene
Embrace the cringe. That's what I say.
the scene where Jack Nicholson is crying in front of Keanu Reeves, I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember this. And I was like,
I know.
that's not something that was where I was really blown away by Jack's performance. I was just like, oh, he's crying in front of a man saying thank you for saving my life. And
it's not played for laughs.
not played for
either,
laughs. No,
you know?
not at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't, tensions never broke. Yeah. And that level is stayed there throughout the whole time. And even at the end, like the dinner with Keanu, Diane, and Jack, you're just like, oh, he's going to be like, he realizes what's up and is going to leave. It's like, no, they had a nice, fun, charming time. Like you don't need to break the tension. It's like, just kind of live in it and then it'll adapt. And that's Nancy Meyers' big thing. She's like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to let this breathe a little longer than you expect it to. Like, and it's a knock and it's a compliment, but at the same time.
Yeah. Like when you look at the running times for a Nancy Meyers movie, you're like, oh my God, 136 minutes. Like what's going on here?
The Parent Trap being over 2 hours is insane. But at the same time, you're like, well, I like the beats and
exactly.
Yeah.
As many as you want, Nancy. Throw another one in there.
I remember specifically a review of this film at the time saying it's like I really like this film because it ended 4 times. Talk about and we had Return of the King obviously with its 6 innings. So I mean it was the year of missed endings.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing I wanted to reiterate, of course, is the crying montage.
Yes.
Just to speak about that a little more. Her forgetting about her date with Julian and just sobbing, her writing and sobbing, her laughing that turns into sobbing. Like, it's just incredible, just the physicality of it, even like the comedic timing, especially the volume of the crying. Like, it's such an ugly cry, right? And it's so perfectly edited together on top of that. And just like, she's really just like throwing her weight into it. Or every time.
Her waking up from a dead sleep and then right into a bellowing cry. Like, get a good chuckle out of it each time. Or her laughing and then crying.
Exactly.
The writing, laughing, writing, remembering something, back into crying. Like, it's
right.
Like you said, a tour de force of...
It truly, she earned that Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical.
So I had a question for you. I know it's not in the realm of possibility, but rewatching it today... We're watching it this week. Like, could we as a society have made a push for Best Supporting Actress for Frances McDormand? Because she is
she's
so good in this movie. And she's barely in it. And I'm like, what is Frances McDormand doing here? And
they kind of like drop her after the first act.
She's so good.
Which is a shame, but she is incredible.
Yeah.
Just again, I mean, speaking about like micro expressions.
Oh man.
Just like she has so much fun, just like needling Jack and all that stuff.
Like her,
so great.
Her fluttering eyes whenever she first meets Keanu Reeves. It's like,
yes.
like Amanda Peet staring daggers through him, or like eye banging him, and then like she's all this like gentle, like it's very
great comedic performance,
un-Francis like. Like what is she doing here? Like, it works. She needs to do more comedy. Like I know. Like, you think of Fargo and you're like, that's the comedy. That's kind of what she did for a long time. And then she adjusted, obviously, in this new thing. But I mean, like, this entire cast, nobody really misses. Everybody's great. Yeah. Like, everybody's pretty. Everybody does a really good job. I think it's a great Keanu performance. Like,
it really is.
And it's a little more layered than just being a pretty guy. Like, it's a very like, well, why does Keanu take this? And he's like, he knows he's not going to win, but like, he still gets to be the good guy. Like, great performance from him.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, just I wish this was a SAG Ensemble nominee.
Right?
Because I think it deserved more than just like the Diane Keaton show. Like, the whole cast is great.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unless we have anything else, we can move on to our next nominee. A very different type of film, different flavor. Okay. Samantha Morton in America. So this was our other huge surprise nominee in this category,
Yep.
perhaps even more so than Keisha. Samantha Morton, born in Nottingham, England. She had a kind of difficult childhood, and she was eventually placed in foster care, but she got involved in a junior television workshop and sort of found her calling and did TV work in Britain through the late 90s. And she had her indie breakthrough in film with Under the Skin, which was her first lead performance in film and got her a few critics awards. And that's where Woody Allen discovered her and cast her in his next movie, Sweet and Lowdown, where she is playing a mute woman, and she got a lot of critic praise for that and got an Oscar nomination in Best Supporting Actress. And she did some more smaller movies after that, but then her mainstream breakthrough was in Minority Report in 2002. And I think that's where a lot of maybe casual viewers would recognize her most. Big role for her. She's also starring in Morvern Collar, the Lynn Ramsey film, more critic praise for that. And then In America, directed by Jim Sheridan. It's about an Irish family who moves to the United States on a tourist visa. So we have Johnny, played by Paddy Considine, who's the patriarch and struggles to find work as an actor. His wife, Sarah, Samantha Morton, is the mother, and she gets a job at this ice cream parlor to support the family. And they have two young daughters, Christy and Ariel. So the film is about their struggling to integrate while they also are still grieving the death of Frankie, Johnny and Sarah's other child, who died when he was 5. There's also this plot line involving their neighbor in their tenement, Mateo, played by Jaimin Hunsu, who the girls get to know, and he kind of becomes this integral part of their experience. So let's talk Samantha Morton. Thoughts on Miss Morton overall and her big surprise nomination here?
It's funny to have, the Oscars love going big. They love have the showy performances. It's really fun to have a lineup with two very understated performances. Now,
I know.
I don't think, like, Morton has some spots where she gets to go a little bigger than that super understated. She gets to have those moments, but I mean, it's just a cool nomination to have. Like, this is not the kind of person who is like, oh, she's this huge indie darling and everybody loves her. It's like, I think that Sweet and Lowdown nomination was a bit of a surprise, and then she gets a follow-up nomination for this film, which this is not like a big, like, super huge successful film. This was like another kind of indie darling and was moderately successful, much more it art house size. It's pretty well successful, but like, she's not the kind of film, not the kind of performance you expect. And you could much more talk me into her being supporting than Keisha Castle-Hughes. I think she is a lead, and I'm fine with her being a lead, but it's not the kind of performance you expect to get nominated. I'm still, even watching the film again, which this is, of the 5 nominees, this is my favorite of the films. I love In America. But anyway, but like, she does some stuff in here, like, it's just, again, underplaying everything, where a different actress would just not be doing what she's doing. She's unlike any other actress I know, just because, for a lot of reasons. She doesn't look like anybody else. The super short buzz cut, the the mentality that she's so incredibly un-American. Like, she doesn't feel American. Like, even in Minority Report, where she's playing, I guess, an American, like, she's closer to an alien than she is a person. And her playing a normal person doesn't feel right. Like, there's got to be something to it. Like, and this is as close as she gets to ever really playing a normal person. And she really has a level of just warmth and sweetness and just, like, quiet tenacity that I really do really like this performance. And I think it's a nice surprise that she gets this nomination.
It is. Yeah. I mean, Samantha Morton is such a fascinating actress to me. I think she has a lot of range, and maybe Hollywood hasn't always had a strong sense of what to do with her. But, she also does a lot of British productions too.
Yep.
She's not chasing a Hollywood career. There is just this, I want to say, like, ferocious quality she has at times.
Yeah.
Like, especially in Minority Report, you really see that. But there's also, like, a tenderness too, and, like, this quiet power that she's really doing here. This is such a wild nomination to me, which is not to say I don't like it.
Yeah.
I think it's very inspired that the Academy went out of their way for this one,
Yeah.
especially even compared to Keisha, because like for as unique as that is, like there's still like a bit of a showiness to what Keisha's
Yeah.
doing, to some of that performance and a narrative of that being her debut. This, like, Samantha Morton is not even the number one lead. Like, that is definitely Patty here. I think it's, to your point, negligible if she even is a lead, just based on the material she gets. And for a lot of the film, she is very quiet, very reactive. So the fact that, you know, like a widespread Academy, that there were enough voters that could appreciate this performance despite not being showy for 90% of it, I think is pretty cool, you know.
Yeah.
And I think this film is definitely underrated. I don't know if I see a lot of awareness of in America these days,
Yeah.
but I like its approach to like just telling this, you know, immigrant story with a lot of heart, but not making it feel too schmaltzy
Yeah.
in a way. Like you could tell here as well, you could tell a lot of love went into this
Yes.
production, and there is this scrappy quality, I think, that sort of matches what this family is going through. And I think the love between the family is so genuine
Yeah.
that there's never a second that you don't buy it, you know.
Yeah. And you know, those immigrant story films, a lot of the time it's about the journey to
Yeah.
get to where they need to be. And this one, the journey's over in 2 minutes and they're there. And then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, well, we're here now. What does that
What
mean?
now?
And living in New York, and it's obviously I don't live in New York City, but from what I understand, a little difficult to make a living in New York City, and it's
Yeah.
expensive, and you live in a friggin' tenement because that's the only thing you can afford. And on top of that, trying to be an actor in New York City, a working actor while having
Yeah.
a family and in the middle of a heat wave, and there's levels of things in the way without feeling like it's overwhelming to watch. Like
Right.
it's not beat you down into submission and worse and worse and worse things happen. It's these are
More on that in a
more
moment.
on that. We'll get there, believe me.
Sorry, I keep shading 21
Not
grams.
at all.
Go on.
You deserve it. But like you go on, and they're just obstacles that need to be overcome. And it's overall, you never feel like this family, nothing's going to happen to this family. They're going to stick together. Something might happen, but like
Right.
there's no questioning, like Patty Considine's never going to leave. And like nothing bad is going to happen. Like there's a level of it's kind of same thing with Whale Rider, like the same level of like not really happy things, but kind of a happier vibe of it all. It doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I really like what Morton does
Hmm.
when she's quiet. Like the scene I always go to for some reason whenever I think of her performance, she's walking up the stairs and she just stops and sits on the stairs and just is like kind of just giving herself a minute. Like, I'm not going to be a mother for a second. I'm not going to have to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and just stop. And it's a really, and she doesn't really necessarily do anything. She's just catching her breath because it's hot. And that's just kind of the emotion of the movie of like, we're gonna try to get better and things keep happening, but we're gonna take these little moments to appreciate the where we are, and we're fine. Like it's much more optimism of everything, much more than the pessimistic view of the world.
Yeah, I think she has a very lovely presence here that is fully in service of the story.
Yeah.
Like she never overshadows the scene. She's all about this love for her family and providing for them, and I think she makes really great use of her eyes and her body language to just show how there is love there, but there's also a deep fear at the same time, and like the trauma of losing her son and kind of blaming herself for not being attentive enough. You know, when the accident happened, like it's, for me, it's this feeling of like having endured so much grief and just like working really hard to give a better life for her family. And she's still not exactly happy with their kind of rough, you know, living arrangement now that they're in America, but she's going to give it a shot and just like make the most of it.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of just like, you know what, I have my family. that's all that matters. Like, we're all kind of intact. We will survive this, even though this is going to be tough and this might not be what we expected. Like,
Yeah.
we're still going to give it a go. We're not going to wallow in it, you
And there's
know?
so many grief stories out there in the world that are just
Yeah.
downer and downer, 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 downer. This is really overcoming that grief, but like it doesn't have to define every aspect of your life. This woman lost a child, and she's
Mm-hmm.
still like, I have to take care of these girls. I have to love my husband. I have to go forward and do these things. It's not like, it's obviously, you feel like the loss of her son is always in the back of her head, but it's never in the front of her head. Like she
Right.
never lets it dominate anything she does, but always kind of having this level of like sadness. At any moment, she could lose it, but she doesn't.
Yeah.
She's going to keep it together for the sake of her daughters, for the sake of her husband. And it's really interesting to have her kind of persona in this movie because she has that very loving maternal aspects to these girls who couldn't with these two girls running around in the world. It was like, you know what, I'm gonna be motherly to these two as well. But also being sexy, being like super like I
Sure.
still love my husband and I'm attracted to my husband
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to show that in the it I had a little bit of a Munich flashback whenever during their sex scene, which
Oh, no.
which I know not the greatest comparison, but it reminded me a little bit of, Jaimin
Mm-hmm.
Hansu tearing up that thing while they're in the middle of consummating a child. But at the same time, like there's levels to that. It's not exactly this most subtle in the world, but at the same time, her performance, she's in this euphoric state and then immediately drops to not being euphoric because her husband's eyes remind her of her son. Like it's
Yeah.
there's always that there, and she underplays that really beautifully, and she doesn't allow the over sentimentality of it all to overwhelm the scene. It's like it's you get sad in a moment you didn't expect to be sad.
Yeah. And that whole scene of them, coming back to the house after the carnival and, playing with the kids, but he has this kind of like trigger of
Yeah,
remembering their
I was looking
son
for
and
him. Yeah,
right. And her just quietly sort of reassuring him and trying to calm him down, and of course that leads to that connection on that intimate level and having sex.
yeah,
But just, I love that moment when she does kind of like suddenly go cold
yeah,
when he asks what's wrong.
yeah,
And she's just in that bothered state again of, yeah, saying that, their dead son had Johnny's eyes and everything. And she says, should have been there to catch him when he fell down the stairs. It's my fault.
and even that, like it's not like what's wrong, and she tells him. He has to poke and prod at her a little bit. Like
Yeah,
she's still got these
no, it's
like
true.
I'm not going to be immediate. I'll let you know, but it's not gonna like you're gonna have to pressure me to let me know. Like it's not
Yeah,
something that I'm immediately going to be immediately available to. My emotions are on the front page. It's like no, you have to dig and you have to get there, and that's the more like you said, the more I think about it compared to what the rest of this year was for actressing, a miracle she got in. Like
I know.
it's just it's not a performance that people are like that's definitely the one. Like especially the 2003 lives. Like that's not like she just is it's different energy. It's not
Mm,
dominant. It's underplayed. Even whenever she gets to like after she has the baby and she's yelling, don't wake me up. It's like those scenes aren't the most shouty-ish. She underplays that too. Like she underdoes it all, and it's just not something that is rewarded a lot.
yeah. Yeah, it feels like one of those performances that like people look back on and they're like, "Oh, she was so like underrated. She was
Yeah,
so good in that.
yeah,
I wish the Oscars could have recognized how
that
brilliant
would
she
have been a
was,
really
but she's
cool
too subtle."
nomination. Yeah, yeah,
Right, right. And yet they actually did it this time. Yeah, but I love the scene also when they're talking to their kids about her being pregnant with them, and like she pretends that the one in her belly is kicking, but like Johnny won't pretend that it is,
I don't feel
and
anything.
he
Yeah,
says, yeah, he says he can't feel anything, and that's when she finally snaps,
yeah,
where she's like, "That's why you can't get a job because you can't feel anything."
yeah, and
And
yeah. And that harkens back to earlier. He's an audition, and the guy's like, "I wanted to hire you, but you don't have any heart with
right,
it." And
yeah,
that is enough of a snap Like, she is so lived in this character. It's really interesting how I feel like the film is structured, because it's written by Sheridan and the daughters. The mom did not write it. And I was thinking, like,
Right.
well, where's she? Like, what's like, it's their view of her as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
her actual perception. And it's kind of saintly, but
Yeah, it is.
at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, like, how do you like, how much is it what I want to remember of my wife and what the reality of it is? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that was the purpose. Like, it's a feature, not a bug. Like, it's we don't that's not the perspective we want to tell. We want to tell this saintly figure because that's all we remember of her. And
Sure.
she doesn't overdo it. She doesn't overdo the saintliness of it all. She allows herself to be a little pricklier than that.
Right. And that is why you cast Samantha Morton for this role,
Yeah.
to not make her two-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously, I think the hospital bed scene is kind of like her big
Yeah.
moment where she's in the delirium, where she is like blaming Johnny for their son's death, and she wants to see, Frankie, their son, and she gets to a level of intensity that I remember being so striking in Minority Report, which I
Yeah.
talked about, where like she's kind of this like unassuming, quiet presence for a lot of it, but she's capable of like really extreme emotions, which really takes you aback. And she just keeps like raving over and over again, like, "Why did you take the gate down?"
Yeah.
And it's just like really like bracing stuff
Yeah.
that you're not
And
expecting.
she's able to go there. Like, you think of, like
Yeah,
you said, Minority Report, screaming run at the top of her lungs right in Tom Cruise's face.
that's
Like, just
right.
like that level of like, I'm gonna it's like, okay, here's the part where I freak out, and I'm going to freak out, and you're not gonna get me back. Like, and you're gonna have to leave the room, freak out. Like, it's
Yeah,
there's no calming me. And
right.
even that, like, it's not like, oh, she's screaming hard. No, she's just her intensity with it is the thing that propels her over the top. It's not all about the volume. It's just like the presence of this is a lot, and this is,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it's the energy that only she can bring. And I
Mm.
really think it's a casting wise, it's not really what you like. In hindsight, you don't expect this to be the casting choice you make, but it's one that's the
Right.
perfect choice.
Yeah. So I think it's really beautiful, understated
I
work
think so
on
too.
the whole. It's the kind of performance that makes me wish she had more screen
Yeah.
time so we could see even more
Yeah.
layers and really explore how she is truly feeling. So maybe that's a little bit of a downside, but kudos Academy for putting this one on the map and, ignoring some of the flashier performances like a Nicole Kidman and Cold Mountain kind of thing where it
Yeah.
could have been like an easy sort of thing to slot in there,
Yeah.
but they appreciated this kind of different form of acting,
Yeah.
which I appreciate.
Yeah,
So,
there's it's a spectrum. So and this is obviously the
yeah,
one side of the spectrum. Yeah.
yes. Well, speaking to that, let's move on to
Oh,
our final final losing nominee, Naomi Watts in 21 grams.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Naomi Watts getting her first Oscar nomination this year. She's got another one coming in about a decade. But to introduce her, Naomi, born in Shoreham, England, and she moved around a lot in her childhood, ultimately settling in Australia when she was a teenager. She was enrolled in acting classes where she met Nicole Kidman, and they became very good friends. She was in the movie Flirting alongside Nicole, but she kind of struggled to really connect in the industry once she got to Hollywood. So she took on roles in film and TV, things like Tank Girl, Children of the Corn 4, not much hitting. And then David Lynch came along and took a chance on her and made her the star of Mulholland Drive, which was a huge turning point and got incredible reviews. Unfortunately, I think the movie was a little too weird for a widespread Academy to vote for her that year, but perhaps some of that goodwill helped to get her this nomination and, helped her just generally in her career, because in 2002, she's the star of The Ring, which was a major mainstream success for her. And in 2003, she's booked and busy. She's in Ned Kelly, she's in Le Divorce, and she's in 21 Grams. So, 21 Grams, directed by Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. This is his first English language film. And it's one of many films in the early to mid 2000s about people's lives being interconnected in surprising ways. It's about these three people. Benicio del Toro is Jack, a former convict and now born again Christian. Naomi Watts is Christina, a married woman with kids who has a past with drug and alcohol addiction. And we have Paul, played by Sean Penn, and he is needing a heart. And so their lives are converge one day when Christina's husband and kids are killed in a car accident by Jack, which leaves her devastated, and she agrees to donate her husband's heart, which ends up going to Paul and allow him to live on. And Paul eventually befriends Christina, knowing he has her husband's heart, while Jack walks free because Christina didn't press charges, and all of this eventually comes to a head. Also worth noting, this story is presented in a non-linear narrative, which makes things kind of disorienting at first, but I guess it sort of all comes together eventually. So, yes, Naomi Watts. Thoughts on Naomi and her performance in 21 Grams?
This nomination is a gigantic sorry we didn't nominate you for Mulholland Drive nomination. Like, it's in hindsight, it's weird. Like, I always feel like she was nominated. Like, I look back on it and I go, yeah,
it feels spiritually like she was.
Spiritually, yes, because that's definitely one of those, like, it's nominated performances and you're like, man, that is a excellent nomination across the board. Probably should, people talk, oh, that probably should have won, and then you look back on it, you're like, oh, she didn't. Okay, that was dumb. And then the Oscar just looking for any excuse to give her a nomination. And as soon as 21 Grams came around, that was the excuse. I don't get the Oscars Inarritu thing. Like, they really like him, and it's weird.
You and me both.
It's
yeah.
Like, we are definitely going to talk about this. This movie is a big fat bummer, and in the biggest possible way. And we talked about, like, with World Rider in America, how, like, bad things are happening, and but there's like a vibe of, like, sunniness. It's like there's none of that here. It's all gross and dirty and
grimy,
bad and grimy.
Yeah.
And I like Naomi Watts as a performer in a general sense. Like, it makes a lot of sense. This is a coronation nomination. They didn't give it to her for Mulholland Drive. Ring was a huge hit. This thing comes around. Here we go. Naomi Watts is the new thing. And I don't blame her for what she did, because I think if not for the performances of the main trio, this movie is unwatchable, because I think they do everything they can with what the film asked them to do. But what the film asked them to do is ridiculous. She is either I'm a nice, happy housewife, or I'm insane. And not really an in-between. There's no shades to this character. It's either I'm on one level or I'm on another level. And the in-between is not really allowed to be there. And I don't know, like, maybe if the film is presented in a linear fashion, maybe I could see those shades actually grow, and it'd be really interesting to see her go from that to the other, kind of like Eleanor Parker in Caged, kind of like, okay, I want to see her as this one version, and then adapt to that. But that doesn't really happen because the non-linear narrative jumps around such, and she's just all shouty insanity. I do want to shout out Naomi Watts' best performance, which is her performance at the Oscars, watching the clip of her Oscar clip. And she is mortified by the clip that they showed, and she goes, oh no. And like, she has this really visceral reaction to it, as you should. I think the scene has the one where she's freaking out Sean Penn in the kitchen. Like, that's
one of her many freak out moments.
One of her many freak out moments. But it's like, it's either quiet subtlety or freak out, and there's not really an in-between.
Yeah.
And it's much more the problem of the film, but this is not a good movie, and it's hard to say that she's good in it.
Yeah, it can be hard to separate that at times.
Yeah.
I am very much not an Iñárritu guy. I find him to be very humorless.
Yep.
Even in something like Birdman, which I think is maybe his best film, there is a kind of smugness there that I don't care
Yeah.
for. I've seen most of his films, but I had never actually seen 21 Grams, perhaps for a
Yep.
reason. I was definitely dreading it, which is probably not a great mindset going into a film, but I was hoping to be at least pleasantly surprised. And I think the performances, in large part, are very good. Not perfect, but
No.
certainly the highlight
Yeah.
here. The story, the way it's presented, just does not work for me on any level. I think there is just a pretentiousness to the writing for me and to the whole structure of it that I just find myself very unmoved,
Yeah.
essentially. It reminds me a little bit of Monsters Ball, where they're just kind of throwing a lot of trauma on the screen, and it feels kind of predetermined, I think, in a way that I can't personally connect to. It feels kind of artificial to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
you know?
And I mean, even the the plot points you think would be, oh, we're trying to make this weighty, and you're like, well, this doesn't ring true anywhere. Like Benicio del Toro is so Bible thumper at one point, but then he like lets his son hit his daughter again. Like that was very strange. And then like the writing is the problem. The how this
Yeah.
entire film is structured. Not even like, even if it's linear, I think there's still an issue. Because like Sean, what do you know anything about Sean Penn? Sean Penn character. You know, like
Yeah.
he has a bad heart. He's married to Charlotte Gainsborough, who I forgot was in this movie. And
Yeah.
and then like he gets a new heart. He feels good. He doesn't want a baby. And then there's like this gross like anti-abortion message in the middle of it. And I'm just like, well, I
Yeah.
hate that. And then and yeah, it just feels I've never had a film feel so undercooked while doing so much that it's trying.
Yeah. It's a lot of ingredients thrown into the pot, and then
Yes.
they didn't actually put on the burner.
Yeah, like it does, it has a lot on its mind. The entire idea of the film, 21 grams being like, what's the
Mm,
weight of the soul? And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, where's that exploration? Like,
yeah,
there's
just at the end.
there yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Like and you know, there's some avenues, like there are morsels of something really interesting here. Like there are morsels of like it's just hard with a film so devoid of any sort of light or humor or anything. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing to be, hey, remember that slightly funny part, or remember this fun with a little bit of levity. There's none of that. Just none. It's
Yeah.
just dark, sad grime, trauma, tragedy, and it's going to keep doing this. And I mean, at the very end, there's this slight little glimmer of hope. But what makes you think that this is going to turn out okay? Like nothing about what we watched is that. And Watts is specifically probably hurt the most by it. Like Penn has nothing to do. Del Toro has the most well, like furthest journey, but all she gets to do is be sad. And there's not really much to grasp on with that as a character. Like she does what she can, but the whole time I'm just like, well, like why do I care about these people? And
Yeah.
I don't.
I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
So, but she is putting in the work, I
Yes.
think, to her credit.
She's not
And
half-assing
for
it.
me,
Yes.
no, I think she is the MVP for me personally.
Yeah.
I think this is such a miserable character
Yeah.
to, like, in terms of what she's put through, how she responds to trauma, like everything. It's like this dark cloud over her
Yeah.
at all times.
Yeah.
And I think to her credit, she does know how to portray characters like this and make you just feel her pain. And I do think she does that pretty well here. I think it's difficult because this was such a tough watch, and I think the characters are so much more shallow than is intended.
Yeah.
But Naomi really lays it all out there, and I do kind of have to commend at least the effort, because you can feel her grasping
Yeah.
for a character here, I think.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's always kind of funny to be like, you know, when you have a Hollywood breakthrough that's a David Lynch movie, you're like,
Hmm.
cool, this what it's going to be like for the rest of my life? I'm like, no, like, sorry, like
Yeah,
it's
spoiled her.
it's spoiled. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's spoiled her. Yeah, it's like it's you're a professional athlete. You win the championship the first year, and you're like, this is what's going to be like all the time. It's like, I mean, you'll it'll be up and down, but I mean, like I said, this is a year after, 2 years after Mulholland Drive. The Ring has come out and is successful at this point, but she doesn't have any vanity. She's very willing to put herself out there in a very open way, but it's not a
Mm,
way I want to see. And it's hard. It's not something to like, yeah, you're really doing it. Good for you. It's like, okay, you're doing it, but I mean, okay, like it's so funny, like we had talked about earlier about all these films with these female performances with women involved. And this one is just about how this woman is defined by her loss and
yeah.
not like nothing else defines her. It's the opposite of the In America character because she
Hmm.
doesn't let that define her. It's like, not only am I going to let this define me, it's going to define everything I ever do for the rest of my life, and you can't tell me anything different. Like there's no subtext to that. It's very like, oh, I'm sad and I'm going to be sad. Like where else is there to go? Like there's nothing else for this character to cling on to besides to be sad. And it
Yeah.
doesn't, it's not captivating.
Yeah. It is very much lingering in that hopeless feeling,
Yeah.
which is not great to be in for 2 hours.
No,
Um,
no.
I think just to pinpoint a few scenes where she does the most with not as much in terms of depth, I do think like the scene where she goes to the hospital and finds out her husband
Yeah.
is in critical condition from the accident and that both her daughters are dead
Yep.
is very effective. Like we've seen a lot of these types of scenes of like a parent grieving, but I think the way she just like immediately starts shaking almost
Mhm.
in fear and just like collapsing to the floor in tears,
Yeah.
it's a lot, but like just like the way she's almost gasping for air, it's just like this unimaginable grief, especially for a woman who's dealt with a lot of pain in her past. Like she has this drug addiction and all this stuff, and now it
Yeah.
feels like she had finally gotten things under control, only for everything to just like collapse again. I think that's just a at least an early scene that I felt like, wow, this is really heavy stuff, and like depending on where we go with it, this could be very
Yeah.
moving in the
Yeah.
end, but like for me that was a little bit like the peak
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. I agree. And like you said, that's where she gets to do the most. I mean, it's very obvious, but the
Yeah,
like it's really interesting to be like, your daughters are dead, your husband's not yet. It's like,
right.
okay, where should I be happy, where should I be sad? And
I
she
know.
kind of lands in this middle of like, I don't know how to process this, and kind of just
Hmm.
collapsing in on herself. That's really interesting. I really like I don't like the overall scene itself, but whenever Sean Penn tells her that she has Danny Houston's heart, like
Yeah.
that scene, her yelling is not necessarily the scene part that I like. It's all the stuff leading up to the yelling, which I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
she's doing some stuff here. Like her
Yeah.
her her desire to connect essentially, and her kind of clinging and like forcing him to like be here and love me essentially is, I think she adds a lot more to that than other actresses wouldn't, and she's really devoted to it. And then when it turns, obviously it's just all yelling, shouting, righteous indignation, but at the same time, like it's like there's other actresses probably wouldn't be doing as hard as much effort as she was. Like she's
Yeah.
really devoted to it. Like, and it's kind of what you have to have for this type of movie. Like we know Penn and Del Toro will go for it, and they have to go for it even though they don't like. Penn actually has to underplay everything weirdly, and Del Toro is
Hmm.
all going for it, and Watts has to kind of mix the two. It's what the script called for, I guess. That's what I kept telling myself every time. I'm like, well, it's what the movie wants her to do, even though I
Yeah.
I I, I don't agree with the reasoning behind it.
Sure.
I still appreciate her performance.
Yeah. For me, the only other thing I wanted to mention is just that her kind of like pushing people away sort of thing, I think is very well portrayed, just
Yeah,
in the sense that like after she lets him come to her house and just like hang out for a little bit, and he's asking if he can see her again, and she
yeah,
just has this look of total distrust on her face that is just like, I am entirely closed off. And like she says she's a married woman and kind of leaves it at that. Like that's just kind of her default initial reaction, is to like push people away.
Why did
Because
you
she
say
just,
you liked me? That's a really interesting, like, little scene she does
yeah,
there. Like, that's like you said, she's really closed off for good reason. I mean, it's
yeah,
like, what a good excuse to not have to be around people, right? But I mean, at the same time, but
yeah. So I mean, I don't want to linger too much on the film
by
itself
all
because I
means,
just find it to be very
th-
mostly
I
distasteful.
think a
But
good Melissa Leo performance. I think
good
she
Melissa Leo.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think this is one of the first things people really kind of like saw her in, right? Like,
yeah,
it's kind of the
yeah.
springboard to later success. But yeah, I watched this in the theater when it came out, and I
Mm.
rewatched this again, and that's enough for me. And I don't imagine there has to be another podcast like this where they're like, "Hey, can you rewatch 21 Grams again?" And I'll go, "Fine," but I really don't want to ever watch this
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for soldiering on
again. my
and for the sake of the show.
my pleasure. My
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah. A lot of big crescendo moments in the film that I just feel like I wish there was some connective tissue
Yep.
that could help me fully appreciate it more.
Yeah.
But giving it her all.
Yeah.
So,
Trying her best. Good for her.
yes.
I'm glad she has more than one Oscar nomination.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she might deserve a little more
I agree.
than 2
Yep.
in her career. Shall we move on to our winner?
Let's.
Alrighty. So, Charlize Theron in Monster. Okay. This is Charlize's first nomination as well, and what a big introductory nomination to introduce her. She was born in South Africa. Her first language is actually Afrikaans, but she learned English, and she dabbled in a lot of different arts, including dance and modeling, before eventually flying with her mother to the United States to do a bit of modeling, but mostly to jumpstart this career in acting. Her first few roles were in films like 2 Days in the Valley, That Thing You Do, Trial and Error, eventually getting stronger roles in things like The Devil's Advocate, Mighty Joe Young, The Cider House Rules. 2000 is a big year where she's in 4 films. She's in Reindeer Games, The Yards, Men of Honor, and The Legend of Bagger Vance. Quite eclectic.
Yeah.
So she's kind of establishing herself well, but is mostly seen as an ingenue type and very much valued for her beauty. And in 2003, she's also in The Italian Job. But Monster is such a huge turning point where she's really proving her worth as a serious actress, where she's playing Eileen Wuornos, a real-life sex worker who murdered 7 men and was put to death. There were quite a few other actresses in the mix who either producers were considering or they wanted for the part, like Drew Barrymore, Selma Blair, Allison Hannigan, and Reese Witherspoon. But Charlize had the X Factor, and she also signed on as the producer. Fun fact for you right at the top here, this is actually the first instance of an actress who was also credited as a producer on her film to win
Happens
Best
a lot
Actress.
these days, but yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, there have been a few instances of like uncredited producer type stuff, like Mary Pickford, because like
Yeah.
the crediting in the
Sure.
20s was very different, and Ellen Burstyn, who was basically all but producer, but in name only,
Yeah.
just not really. But Charlize was the first to be credited, so that's kind of cool. But anyway, fully immersed herself into transforming. She gained 30 pounds. She wore a bunch of makeup, obviously. She shaved her eyebrows. She was basically unrecognizable. And so Monster tells the story of Eileen Wuornos as she lives her life on the street. She's homeless, and she enters a bar one day where she meets Selby, played by Christina Ricci, and the two of them fall in love. But one night when Eileen is on the job, a John beats her up and abuses her, and she retaliates by shooting and killing him. And that kicks off a string of murders by Eileen as she murders multiple men who are soliciting her services, largely because, kind of as the film depicts it, she can't get a traditional job because no one will hire her, and she wants to provide for Selby, and she also wants to get rid of these men who are taking advantage of women. So yes, here's our winner, Charlize Theron. Ben, thoughts on Charlize overall and her huge Oscar-winning performance here?
Yet another fun-filled film adventure.
Sure.
Like you said, it's a very indie darling dish, but I mean,
Yeah.
really interesting point for Charlize and to have this film and then kind of like coming out of that. It's really interesting to look at where she was in her career. Like this, really appreciate her performance. And
Mm,
because for a lot of factors, one, obviously, like when you're that beautiful, it's weird to be like, I'm going to make you ugly. And they did a great job of making her look ugly. That being said,
mm,
that being said, like there's a rawness to what Charlize does. Like it's kind of like I you would think this was somebody in their debut. Like you don't feel the you don't feel the experience of acting experience. You don't like the
mm,
fact that she's been in fairly big things for the past 7 years before this. You don't feel that here. Like
right.
it's very much a wow, I am untrained going into this and just like doing what needs to be done. Like there's no vanity, there's no history with all of that. It's just kind of like she goes in and does this in this way in a very raw, like nervy way that I'm shocked it's not a I'm shocked she gave this performance at her time. And I kind of feel like the Academy came along and went, cool, Charlize Theron, beautiful woman, giving this performance, they ugly it up, big, gain some weight. We're going to give her this Oscar. She's going to get this, and then we'll never hear from her again. And then Charlize kind of adjusted into this new kind of actress. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting to watch it now with the last 20 years of Charlize, as opposed to seeing it in '03, where you never knew she had any sort of ability. Like you kind of
Yeah.
saw her in 2003. She is very much just a pretty face. Yeah, she's in the Cider House Rules, which is real acclaim, but nobody talks about her in that movie.
Right.
And even stuff like underrated stuff now, like the Yards. Again, you don't look at like, oh, that's a Charlize Theron movie. No, no, no. It's just like, and Devil's Advocate doing a lot of stuff. But again, that's a movie was like it's like she is really, really good in that movie, but that's kind of a different type of film. I didn't know she had this in her, and most people didn't. And now you look back and you're like, well, obviously she had it in her. She's an incredible performer. It's just really interesting at this point of her career to give this performance and allow herself to give this performance as opposed to shutting herself off and being more vain Hollywood like.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I've been a fan of hers really since this movie.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if this was the first time I saw her. I'm sure I had seen like Mighty Joe Young when I was younger,
Yeah.
but like I remember having the VHS of that. But anyway, definitely remember seeing this one early on and just her level of commitment to a role, just not even this role,
Yeah.
but any role, I think is really incredible. Like she very rarely rests on her laurels. Like
Yeah.
it's always about challenging herself, sometimes in extreme ways, like with Mad Max Fury Road,
Mm-hmm.
or even like a Bombshell where she's transforming again, or Atomic Blonde, even something like Young Adult, like very different types of things.
Yeah.
And she really puts in the work, and she can have like a coolness to her, like an iciness, but there's also a lot of empathy there too, I think. And she really has that in Monster, which I'm just going to come out and be one of the millions of people who say that this performance is astonishing
Yeah.
to me. I think this is such an incredible transformation where I genuinely don't see Charlize
Yeah.
when I watch this movie at any point. Any point.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously the voice, like it sounds like her to some degree, but just the appearance, the way she carries herself, there's nothing recognizably Charlize in this performance.
Yeah. I mean, like the fact that the Italian Job was the same year is a little wild to me because
Yeah,
she is charismatic, movie star, beautiful, that entire movie. This one is the opposite. Like
right.
and she has this like nervous energy, like
Mm,
this kind of like propulsive energy at all times in this film, but without being all that propulsive. It's really like
right.
a push pull of like I have these big plans, but I don't have
Mm,
any ability to exercise those plans outside of the baser instincts. And I also think it's
yeah.
like she really plays into Eileen's lack of intelligence in a really smart way. Like, it's
Mm.
not like, oh, you're being stupid. It's, I don't have education and I don't have ability and I have nothing.
Resources.
I have no
Yeah.
resources. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a point of the world where people are at their lowest and you have to resort to certain ways to get out of that. And even if you get out of that, you probably revert back to that notion. Like, it's not
Yeah.
something, it's a really real, I agree. It's astonishing. Like,
Yeah.
it's when you talk about Oscar wins, like in the moment, everybody was like, yeah, yeah, afterthought, like she's gonna win, transformation, da 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 da. Time has only been better to this. Like,
I agree.
she's upper echelon of Best Actress winners because of the levels she allows herself to get to of devotion to the character, her commitment. Like you said, she just disappears into this woman. And while being quote unquote monstrous and allowing herself to do the things with the justification and the desire to not do these things. Like, it's not like when you think of serial killers, you're like, I have to kill people. This is more like a means to an end. Like,
Yeah.
it's very fruitful, unfortunately. I kind of look at like something like Can You Ever Forgive Me? Where in that film, all the crimes done was just to live. It wasn't to like, oh, I'm trying to, you know, not like the hustlers type where they're like,
Have
I
fun.
have fun
Yeah.
and
Right.
all this excess. It's just I'm trying to live
Survival. Yeah.
survival. And
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm in this spot where my survival is tied to this love and providing for this person, and that's what I want. And I'm not doing it because I like to do it. It's because I'm capable of doing it, and it's what I'm able to do.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is something I've talked about with other huge kind of like emotionally taxing performances, like with Jenna Rollins in A Woman Under the Influence, or like Ellen Burstyn in Requiem for a Dream. There is such a compassion that she has for
Yeah,
Eileen. And I know that's kind of difficult to reconcile with the fact that she was a serial killer and she
yeah,
like ruined a lot of families' lives
yeah,
and through that. But she really does find an empathy for what Eileen has been through that led her to this point and shows how damaged she was psychologically.
yeah.
And you see that also in the contrast of her relationships with all the Johns and all the men she interacts with, and how fraught that is
Hmm.
compared to her relationship with Selby, where she feels appreciated and loved, and like she is responsible for this other person who sees her for her.
Yeah,
So she does so much great work, I think, with her eyes to just track how she's feeling, how she uses some of that bravado kind of and her sort of imposing nature to scare people off
yeah,
because they could hurt her first
hmm
and she kind of wants to be the one in control.
yeah,
It's such an impressive just physical performance and the transformation is really remarkable, but if you didn't have that underlying emotional connection, I think it would just feel like perhaps the other types of transformational Oscar wins that I won't name right now that are impressive but feel kind of hollow
yeah.
and like it's a win more for the makeup than the actual performance, if you know what I mean.
I have no idea what you're talking about. It seems
Yeah.
very strange. I've never heard what you speak of,
Yes, I
but
know this is an alien concept, but yes.
no, yeah, I mean, I really kind of go back to that scene when they're at the carnival and Selby's having fun with her
Mm,
friends, and
yeah.
she sits there outside of having the fun, but at the same time, like really beams at the idea of Selby having fun. Like, it's not
Hmm.
like it's yes, you have the self-preservation, and I'm hungry and I want to, do better and I want to have better things and nicer things, but at the same time, it's so selflessly you're being evil for selfless reasons, which is odd. Like, it's an
Yeah.
odd balance to strike. And I'm really curious what kind of do they see? Obviously, she is the murderer and that, but I mean, like, I feel like Patty Jenkins and Theron were on the same page about she's really a victim of circumstance and
Hmm.
unfortunate. This is just how she, like, if you ever read about Eileen Wuornos and her life, it is nothing but sadness. There's no
Yeah.
like there is nothing good happens to her at any point in her life, essentially.
Hmm.
And how do you make a woman sympathetic with that without like patronizing the audience of going like, oh, look at all the sad things. That means you should like her. It's like, no, no, no. Like she wants to like those incredibly sad job interviews. You're just like, I
Mm,
want you to do
yeah.
better. Like it's like you want to do it the right way. You don't want to steal. You don't want to be a prostitute. But this is the only thing the world has allowed you to do. Like the world doesn't see her worth outside of anything. They don't even see the worth of her as a prostitute. And they just have to like, and she's manipulated into it half the time. And then there are the terrible men like Lee Turgeson who are going to take her out in the middle of nowhere and do all these unspeakable things. So why would she assume that anybody has her best interest at heart? She has to take charge of it, and she has to resort to murdering these men in order to survive, because what other option has the world given her?
Yeah. That's what makes it such a thorny kind of experience to
Yeah.
watch it, because you do feel that empathy for her, even though she is committing these horrific crimes ultimately. But, I mean, just even the first scene where she does kill that first time is
Yeah.
so harrowing.
Oh yeah.
And she's so good in showing that tension of her interaction with him, where he's saying, like, he loves hookers, but he also hates them. And she just has this, like, look of complete discomfort.
Yeah.
But she tries to play it cool and be like, that's how it usually is, or, something like that. And he keeps, like, antagonizing her, and she just keeps getting restless and being like, come on, man, let me just do my thing.
Yeah.
And how that escalates to him smacking her and just like getting her all bloody. And for me, just like the blood curdling scream when he's like pouring the alcohol on her wounds, and her like kicking and then just like totally snapping and shooting him, I think that's such a well executed sequence, because you do see that gradual loss of control and her just being pushed to the absolute limit, like to the point that she has no other choice
Yeah.
but to do this.
Yeah. And it's really, I find that scene specifically interesting in comparison to the Scott Wilson scene, because like
Yeah.
it's really bookending it, being like, okay, you are the victim here. You are to this level of escape. Like it's very much the, the fox caught in the trap, and you're just like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of this situation. And she
Yeah.
does, and she has this reaction to it and all this kind of stuff. And then comparing it to that Scott Wilson scene where she's like, I don't, it's, she doesn't have to do this, but she's too far gone. And right before she shoots, she lets out that scream. And it's the same side of
Mm,
it about like, this is what I'm doing now. And I hate that I'm doing it. And it's so devastating. And she plays that so well. And he plays that really well. And
I know.
whenever there's men in your life who are nothing but terrible to you, and anybody shows you the littlest bit of compassion, that's so foreign, you don't know how to react to it. And in her case, she's like, well, this is survival mode. Here, you tried to do this. No, 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 I'm not gonna like. And it's just there's no coming back for at that point. Like that's the point when you're like, it's almost like a trick that Jenkins is like, okay, we can't like justify every one of these. We have to give her a little bit of overt like evil without,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, like she's not happy about it. Like it's and Theron goes so hard and so good in that scene. It's so devastating. It's
Yeah.
towering.
I mean, I think all the killing scenes kind of feel different
Yeah.
in an interesting way. But what I also love is, especially after that first killing, she starts to kind of amp up that manic energy.
Yeah.
Like when she's sort of unofficially moved in with Selby at the motel room or wherever they are, and she says like she's gonna quit hooking, and like she's just going a mile a minute about like all her plans to like go straight and get a traditional job and all this stuff. I think she really just modulates that really well,
Yeah.
and to me avoids making it feel mannered and like overacting,
Yeah.
just because there is that underlying desperation
Yeah.
of feeling like, oh, maybe it's all going to be okay now, and like she finally is finding like a solid avenue for moving her life forward.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to focus all in on getting this, good job and everything and all this stuff. And I don't know, it just like kind of breaks your heart in a way, because you know that it's not going to
Yeah.
turn out the way that she is clearly thinking this is going to happen in her mind.
Yeah. and it's really impressive how the filmmaking does that, because you're going into the film knowing that you probably know who Eileen Wuornos is before you go into the film. So you're like, well, she's a
Right.
serial killer. She got put to death. You're going in with that knowledge. So you're like, okay, what are the levels that matter? Like, why would I care? And Jenkins and
Yeah.
Theron do such a great job of just like breaking it down, of going like, this woman was in this situation, and she's more than just the news coverage of her, and
Right.
peeling the layers back and saying what that means, and like doesn't really delve all that deep into her past, how she got to this point. Like it little snippets here and there, but it's not like big huge flashback scenes with
No.
this is why she was the way she was. But I mean, like, and even whenever she explains it, she explains the most horrific thing in casual conversation. Like, and
Yeah.
she's like, oh, this woman is a different level of what you expect. Like, a psychologist could never get to the bottom of this. There's just too much to do. And like you said, like, she goes really hard in those in the scenes where she kills people, but at the same time, there's a level of like just steady, like, I know who this woman is, of Theron's performance, of she doesn't know how to react. She doesn't know how to act in front of people, like how she treats waiters and just like throwing money at them and calling all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like, it's like you don't, it's not even her fault. She just doesn't know. And it's not fair that she ever got to this point. And it's a brilliant film to allow that level of empathy and understanding of somebody who did such things like this.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I mean, even when she's explaining to, I think, the cop that she's going to
Yeah.
kill, like about how she was raped when she was 8 by a family friend and then her father blamed her for it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, this is from childhood, someone who never had a chance,
Yep.
you know,
Just it's an American story. It's a too American of a story.
sadly.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's like there's a lot more of these stories than, and
Yeah.
it's probably why it connected with so many people, just because like this movie made $64 million. That is insane. A movie
Yeah.
like this should have made 74 cents at the box office. Like, it
Hmm.
is not a happy film. It does not end happily. It is dark, dark, dark. It's really interesting having 21 Grams and Monster go back to back in these conversations, because like
Yeah.
this movie is extremely watchable in a
Hmm.
but it's by no means pleasant. Like,
Right.
the level of some good things occasionally happen. There's some levels of humor. There are, but it still has that entire base of what we're talking about without it's not demoralizing to the audience.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is one of those films where, like, you might look back on it and be like, oh, that's one of those movies where it was just carried by the performance, and maybe the movie itself
Yeah.
is not a lot to write home about.
Yeah.
But yeah, on this rewatch, I felt like this is better than I remember it being.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe it's a script thing too, where it does feel like they put a lot of work into crafting this story as kind of like a tragedy ultimately,
Yeah. And it,
you
it
know?
comes across as that, and it's really well cast. Like,
Hmm.
like you think of the Johns, like the Lee Tergesen, Pruitt Taylor Vance, Scott Wilson, like those are some like cool character actors in there doing some things. Like, hey, we need a guy so pathetic that she's not going to kill him. It's like, well, how
Right.
about Pruitt Taylor Vance? Like, perfect. Like, and the like, you think of Bruce Dern just kind of hanging around on the
Hmm.
outskirts, like, and
Yeah.
being really the only good man who gets to be involved in Eileen's life. And you're like,
Right.
yeah, like, that's nice. Like, and then there's a little toss away moment at the beginning where like she was meeting him outside her storage cupboard. It's like, hi, Eileen, here's a couple bucks. It's like, you want a blowjob? No, I'm good. Like, she's kind of like just just passively active, like just passively, allowing for that to be the thing, and be like, no, nope. And that's not what he sees her as. He sees her as
Yeah.
a person, and having Selby see her as a person is the entire driving force for the whole film.
Exactly. Yeah. Actually, the confession scene that she has to
Oh
Selby
yeah.
of that first killing, I think I feel like I have such a powerful memory of seeing that scene, either isolated from the movie or just from whenever I first saw it.
Yeah.
It's such a impressive scene just in how she ramps up to this explosive moment where Selby's kind of like taking her to task about her quitting her hooking, and she finally explodes and says she shot and killed her last John and all this stuff, and her eyes are bulging out,
Yeah.
and it's like this other part of her has taken over, like this animalistic side, and it's kind of just riveting to watch. And she does calm down a bit and she agrees to go back to hooking and everything, and that's where she kills the second guy
Yeah.
who's telling her to call him daddy, and she makes a joke about how he wants to have sex with kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And once again escalating to her shooting him. And I love how she quietly is saying to herself that he was a child molester.
Yeah.
Almost like it's this way of like
I
justifying
justify
it in her
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that whole sequence is riveting
I agree.
to me.
I agree. You talked about vulnerability earlier, and it's kind of like it's what she allows herself to be whenever she confesses to Selby that she killed this guy. Like, she tells him, and then she kind of like sits in it, and like, so what's the reaction going to be? Like, how
Right.
like what levels are our love at? Like, is our love at this point to where you can accept me for what I did? Like, is that something that we are willing to be at? And that's a big moment. Like, it's you think that, like, I'm telling this woman I killed somebody, and what if she leaves? Like, that's a big thing to put out there for her, especially for somebody like
Mhm.
Eileen. And it's just like, man, that's she really just nails every part of it. I'm curious, like, do you like Christina Ricci's performance?
I think she's fine. I think it's a good performance.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as bad as some people say it
Yeah.
is, because I've seen some people who say like Theron totally outclasses her. Like, I would agree with that, but I think she does all right with the role.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Like, I remember thinking at the time she was bad, and some people even were like, she ruined the movie. Like, if like I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think Selby's not the most vivid of personalities, and
Right.
Ricci is allows. I think everybody realizes what they have on their hands, and they're
Exactly.
not going to get in the way. Like,
Right.
it's like no, she is this, and
Right.
I'm my job is to let it is to help that, and I think she does an excellent
Yes.
job of doing that.
Yes. Well, actually, I think the scene where she does towards the end justify her killing to Selby is
Yes.
very compelling.
Yeah.
Just to see Eileen kind of try to work out why she almost feels like this is her calling to like
Yeah.
get rid of these guys before they rape other girls, as she says,
Yeah.
or how people kill all the time for politics or religion and they're thought of as heroes.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
she has made peace with God and all this stuff. Like she's making all these broad proclamations in a way that is just kind of like she's kind of all over the place, which I think is kind of how, again, the real Eileen probably was, and just justifying all these things. And it's like you're trying to sort of follow the logic, but she just seems so kind of lost in her own thoughts in a way.
Yeah.
All that stuff, I think she really communicates really well.
And I think that last scene where she's on the phone
Mm.
with Ricci, and you're just like,
Eef.
the
Yeah.
it's the first time that she accepts the reality of what happens with everything. Like, she knows what's going
Yep.
on, she understands the gravity, and she even gets deeper as like, they're on the phone listening. I know they're listening. I'm going to confess to all this, and I'm going to get you off scot-free. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, sweet sentiment of like, I'm going to let you get away with this, even though there is a world where you are complicit in this. And
Mm-hmm.
but I have saying I'm okay with that, and I am accepting my fate, and this is what it is. And she really subtly comes to that understanding in the middle of the phone call, and just like delivers it, and it's like just heartbreakingly almost like, it's like, you good, we've reached the end, this is good, this is a good ending. Like, it's not
Yeah.
a happy ending, but it
As good as an ending like this could be
exactly,
for this
yes,
story.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So it's really just, undeniable work,
Pretty
which
much,
I
yeah.
think a lot of people agreed,
Yeah,
obviously, in
I
2003.
agree.
So shall we jump into the Oscar race at all?
Let's.
Okay. Well, for the precursors, it wasn't a total sweep for Charlize with the critics, but she did win the National Society of Film Critics Independent Spirit Award. Chicago, New York Online, San Francisco, Vancouver, all this stuff. But Naomi Watts also did very well with critics. She won the Los Angeles Film Critics. She won the Online Film Critics, Washington, D.C. Diane Keaton won the National Board of Review. So it was kind of like between those three. And then with the major precursors, Diane Keaton won the comedy musical Golden Globe. But then Charlize won at Critics' Choice. She won the Golden Globe for drama, and she won the SAG Award. So she was the front runner going into it. And I think, honestly, the more interesting story of then how Charlize won is how we landed on this group of nominees.
Yeah.
Because, again, from everything that I read and from people who remember the race, only Charlize and Diane were thought to be locked and loaded.
Yeah.
Everything else was like 10 women fighting for 3 slots.
Great
And I think,
Best Actress here.
yeah, very much so. And I think they really went off the board a little to fill out the rest of the category. So, you know, like I said, Keisha was campaign supporting, but got this nomination here. Samantha Morton, even more surprising because she barely got anything leading up to it. Naomi Watts got in at SAG, but she was far from a sure thing. So I guess I'll ask partly like how you think we ended up with this lineup also, and then why do we think Charlize was our winner?
Well, I think the Oscars just talked themselves into being like, they always said like whenever that you saw that first publicity still of Renee Zellweger in Judy, that's when she won the Oscar. Kind of the same thing with this. Like it was like, look at what she did. Before anybody saw the movie, they talked themselves into it. Then they saw the movie and went, yep. And it just justified their already front runner status. And there was no reason to deviate. And there, like I said, this is such a Lord of the Rings dominated year. It kind of let the door open for other things that nobody would really care about. They're like, I was listening to the podcast on 1999, whenever they're talking about what you and Morgan were talking about Hilary Swank and Annette Bening. Like Annette Bening was in the Best Picture frontrunner, and then this indie darling. Like there was no indie, the indie darling, but there was no Best Picture frontrunner status to go with. Like all these were, like that's just what it was, and everybody had made up their minds, and it was like nobody was upset at it. Still a great win. Like it's one of the few times where everybody goes, "Yep, this was the right thing to do right at the beginning," and there was nothing to ever change their minds. Like even whenever Diane Keaton shows up kind of out of nowhere, like that movie obviously was not predicted well ahead of time. Like when that showed up, everybody's like, cool, Diane Keaton, but she already has a win. Like we're not going to give her another one when we have Charlize right here. And then everything else is kind of like, cool, we just kind of fill in the gaps. As far as why these 5 came in and not the other people that could have been in there, that's a little strange. Like this Oscar year is really all over the place when it comes to, we're going to award some places here, but not here where we should have. Like we're going to give Alec Baldwin the nomination, but we're going to shun Maria Bello. We're going to give Patricia Clarkson the nomination, but not for The Station Agent. We're going to, Holly Hunter in 13 is going to be there, but we're going to forget Evan Rachel Wood. Like it's very strange as far as how scatterbrained they all were. Like the 21 grams, we're going to have, and then Mystic River of it all. And Mystic River was kind of like the second dominant part of that Oscars. Like it was Lord of the Rings, Mystic River, and then Lost in Translation kind of filled out the rest of it. Those were like the big ones going forward. So that left a big vacuum for everything else. There were not the usual suspects there. There was not the big Best Picture frontrunners. Just kind of like, whatever, I guess we could take chances. And I guess that's what they did, which is refreshing.
Absolutely. And I think also this may have been the kind of thing where Charlize got so many nomination votes, and maybe Diane got quite a few as well, that like there didn't have to be a lot more votes to get to fill in the rest of them. Yeah. And you got these passion picks.
Yes.
Like I do think, you know, obviously we talk about Samantha and Keisha, but I think Naomi was definitely a passion pick too, especially if you look at the nominations announcement. And she get this huge ovation, whoop of applause and everything. Yeah. So yeah,
you see that.
I think passion won out.
I think you're right. In that sense. Like you said, that's really interesting how you put it about like everybody was so on board with Charlize and Diane. They're just like, these are 1 and 2. The
Yeah.
the normal the normal number for nominations is not there.
Yeah.
Like, so
The
you can
threshold. Yeah.
the threshold, it's really a low number. So I would
Right.
imagine numbers 3 through probably 10 were pretty close. And
Yeah.
who
I
knows
wouldn't doubt
who
it.
was there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is Nicole
Right.
Kidman even in the conversation?
Right.
Like,
Who knows?
I don't think so. Like,
Cold Mountain kind of underperformed, so
very,
I don't know.
and it's
Yeah.
because it's a bad movie, but also
Well, yeah.
at the same time. But anyway,
Yeah.
like you would, it's funny to have like Keisha Castle-Hughes makes it, and everybody's talking about, it's like, is Evan Rachel Wood going to be the youngest Best Actress nominee ever? And they go, nope.
Well,
Yeah, and that
yeah.
that seemed like that was the bigger surprise to me. I thought she was going to be the one in.
Yeah. Well, speaking to the win, I actually think that there are quite a few parallels to be made with Hilary Swank's win for Boys Don't Cry,
Ooh,
to continue your point,
yeah,
4 years earlier, where it's like we have this independent film, not really a major contender as a film outside of acting, and it's just like raw, hugely transformative actress proving herself. And that kind of special factor of like capturing so much attention compared to her competition. Like, this is just one of those performances that comes out and it is over, done deal. No
yep,
one else is winning.
yep,
And I think another factor is just how strikingly different Charlize was compared to Eileen. Like, I imagine Oscar voters just like watching her accept the Golden Globe or the SAG, and you have this like glamazon model coming to accept these awards
bright
for playing
orange.
Eileen
Yes, yeah,
Wuornos. Yes,
yeah.
yes, very, very tan. And it's like this wild, like, cognitive dissonance almost. And it's like, you almost can't believe it
Yeah.
just to watch her accept these awards for, like, she played that character, like this woman.
So, like I said, I worked at a movie theater, and I had a poster of The Italian Job on my wall. And after watching Monster, I came home and stared at that for a while and went, I can't believe that's the same person. And it's the same thing.
You're just like trying to study her face.
Yeah, you're just like, I don't see it. I don't see it at all. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's very romantic to that's easy to get behind if you're an Oscar voter. That's an easy sell. Samantha Morton is a hard sell, because you're like, well, what does she do? She's good, but why? Like, it's just like that.
Yeah.
It's much
Well,
easier. It's much easier to explain why that performance is what it is.
yeah. And to speak to that point, I think at this point, we're also starting to see Best Actress is kind of getting some of the similar criteria as Best Actor.
Yeah.
Where you have that gritty transformation type of thing. Like, she checks so many boxes in that sense of, like, it's so easy to point to all these reasons why she won, because you can physically see the transformation and you can see her acting so differently than she acts as a person. It's just, I truly don't think even the runner-up came anywhere close to beating her. Like, this was almost definitely one of those landslide victory years.
Yeah, it was one of those things that everybody talked themselves in. Like, I remember people, like, somehow somebody's like, do you know, I think Robert Downey Jr. could upset Heath Ledger. I'm like, shut up. Like, no, they like, you can, like, you're sitting around for months after the nominations come out, and you have nothing to talk about in this category, so you talk yourself into it. But that's not the reality. This was never not going to happen.
There you go. Congrats, Charlize. Very well-earned victory.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, shall we get to some questions
Let's.
from Twitter? Oh, boy. Okay. Well, Fritz said, to speak to this, was this one of the biggest done deals in Oscar history?
I would say, as far as modern Oscar history, yes. Like, the only thing I can think that comes close is probably Helen Mirren, but that's probably it. Everything else had a little bit of mystery to it, and some, like, talk yourself into it, and like, the vote splitting here and there. But this is, Helen Mirren's the closest thing in the 21st century that I could say is, like, that's as close as to a landslide as it's going to get.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got a similar question with Julia Roberts and her win, and I think it was kind of a similar situation, except Charlize was probably even more of a blowout.
Yeah.
Because, like, even in, like, 2000, you could, argue for Ellen Burstyn and Laura Linney. Both really had a lot of critic support and everything. But here, I just feel like no one came close. Like,
no.
Yeah.
Like, it's always funny how the Academy acts with second Oscars sometimes. Like, they're not going to give a second Oscar to comedic performance like this. Like,
Unless it's Glenda Jackson.
it's like she is the exception that proves
She is
the rule.
always the exception.
She is always the exception. I don't know how she has either one of her Oscars, much less two of them. But I mean, like it's very strange. But I mean,
yeah,
like in that time, you have all these first time. Well, Samantha Morton's the only returning nominee outside of Diane Keaton. So I mean, like,
yeah.
Everything. It checked too many boxes. It checked too many boxes for them to pick anything else.
Christoph said, in his first review for Monster, Roger Ebert famously called Theron's performance one of the greatest performances in the history of cinema. Was he a little bit hyperbolic, or was he the first one to call it?
I mean, Raj with another win. Like, it just being, you look back on it and you're like, I remember it being less. It's only gotten better as the years have gone on. Like that, it's not one where like, oh, Helen Mirren, the Queen's good example. Everybody's like, yeah, really good performance. Da, 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 da. Nobody cares about that performance anymore. And the Charlize, this win has gotten only better.
Yeah. I think there's always a risk sometimes with like critics nowadays, perhaps, where like recency bias is very real.
Yeah.
With making like big declarative statements.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think that's borne out pretty nicely.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, you could say it for every time, and eventually you're going to be right. But I mean, it's hard to argue against.
Well, these are all very similar questions, but Cowboy Bruno said many have considered Theron's win as one of the best or the all-time best win in this category. Do you agree with that statement?
I have it in on a short list. Like it's really hard to be like, oh well, this from this era and this era. You're like, it's kind of like it's hard. It's like different eras of wins and stuff like that. I just know it's an exceptional performance she won the Oscar 100 times over, and it's in the top tier of actress wins.
Yeah. One of the best. Not the very best for me necessarily, but right up there.
Yep.
Yeah. Eric Maxwell Brunn says, is Charlize win a top 10 win in this category for you?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
As of now, and this is subject to change, but just from going through and watching like all the best actress winners again, up to now, she is in my top 10. Yes. And that's not including the winners to come. So we'll see how that changes.
Ooh, interesting. Nice.
But probably won't change too much.
Okay.
Spoiler. Yeah. Glorfindel of Gondolin said, the biopic performance has unfortunately been extremely trendy with the Academy over the last 2 decades. Most of these performances were overrated in my view, but Charlize was truly exceptional. Where does her performance rank for you among other nominated biopic performances?
That's a wide swath to choose from, but I mean, like, when you talk about biopic, this isn't necessarily a biopic. I mean, it's about a person, but it's like, it's this specific moment in their lives, like this.
It's not cradle to grave.
It's not cradle to grave. Yeah. You get to the grave, but I mean, you don't But I mean,
you don't get any flashbacks.
You don't get any flashbacks. That's the difference between this. Like, this is an established person already when it gets there. Like, you don't have to. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. How did she get to this point? Like, that's what I think makes the performance that much more impressive. Is that there's not that foundation of, here's where we got to where we are. We're there, and we have to fill that out outside of what the film shows.
And she does. Yeah. I think pretty damn high among biopic wins and nominees.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Joey Gentili said, should Christina Ricci have gotten into supporting for Monster?
No.
Not for me personally.
I don't see it either. I think
it's not like I think she should be nominated for a Razzie. Let's just say that.
I don't think
like
she's.
Some people really, truly.
Yeah. I don't see her that high, but I like she's a complimentary player more than an active player.
Yeah. Greg Cremeen said, Christina Ricci is completely overshadowed by Charlize. If you could remake a movie with the two of them that would give Ricci more of a presence, which would it be? All About Eve, Suddenly Last Summer, Thelma and Louise, or The Turning Point?
Wow. Of those,
I mean, Thelma and Louise makes a lot of sense for the two of them.
Yeah, it does. They're like, I do love the idea of a Suddenly Last Summer remake where, but Ricci is the Katharine Hepburn, just
Okay. Sure.
just to throw it around, just to like,
Yeah.
uh,
I love it.
you have
Very inspired.
you haven't lived until you've seen Christina Ricci descend from an elevator. So I mean,
Hey,
uh,
why not?
why not?
Yeah. Andy Bayless said Charlize Theron's win seems like it would be matched up with a makeup nomination if there were 5 nominees like now. Does Monster take a makeup win if nominated, or does the Return of the King's clean sweep stand?
Lord of the Rings was undeniable. Like
Yeah.
there's some things in there, like you can question a couple things in there, like adapt screenplay. Okay, like,
Well,
but I mean, if it's winning that, why would it go 10 of 11? Like
right.
that doesn't track. So
No.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah. No. Nowadays, I think yes.
It gets a
Like,
nomination. It gets a
yeah.
nomination for sure. But
Yeah. Like today's Academy, like the Tammy Faye special, like the actress makeup combo, I think
100%.
would have been doable.
Yep.
As long as like the Lord of the Rings isn't in the race, then yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Thompson said Charlize Theron delivers one of the greatest performances committed to film, in my opinion. Was this a done deal the second voters watched the performance? She's been back for North Country and Bombshell, but a talent like this should have more nominations. Where is she? Will she be back? A lot of questions there.
The funny thing about her is that Monster's her only good nomination of her. Like,
Yeah.
her best performances are unnominated.
Yeah.
The young adult, the Tully, the Mad Max, the
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate just her willingness to, like, I don't know if you've seen Long Shot. Long Shot's
I
incredible.
have.
Long Shot is great.
So charming.
So
Yeah.
charming, and
Love it.
she's so good in it. She's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue
Mm-hmm.
her smoking while negotiating with a Middle Eastern hostage holder is one of her highlights of her career.
Yes.
While being high on Molly. So I mean, like, it's she's an incredible performer, and she's the prime example of, like, this is an incredible performer. We're not going to give her the accolades for it. She's going to get all the, like, looking back on it in hindsight, I don't know how she was never in the conversation for supporting actress for Mad Max. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Like, it's just, she does everything she does in that film, as critically acclaimed as it is, and she never got the light of day for that. It feels like something that should have happened.
I mean, I think she will be back
Yeah,
eventually,
I think
but
so too.
it is just weird to me that she still only has the 3 nominations and that 2 of them are North Country and Bombshell. Like,
Yeah,
very Academy in that way,
I
derogatory.
think she's good in North
Um,
Country. Like,
yeah,
I think she does
yeah,
well, and
we'll
that,
get to it.
yeah, yeah,
Nikki Caro.
yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Adam said, this is kind of a broad question, but what are your favorite villainous wins, nominations, and snubs?
Ooh, uh, boy, that's do you have anything off the top of your head? Because I can't really.
I mean, certainly Kathy Bates in Misery is right up
Obviously,
there.
that's the
Um,
gold standard.
both of Glenn's 80s lead nominations are, of course, right up there for me.
Yeah.
Fatal Attraction, especially Dangerous Liaisons. Betty Davis in pretty much anything, but especially Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, or, yeah, Little Foxes, that
How about
stuff.
Faye Dunaway Network?
Faye Dunaway and
That's
Network definitely would be
that's villainous as could
right up
be.
there.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of the one, like, whenever I think of villainous, not villainous, but like the prickly, complicated woman, that's the one I kind of default to.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's probably my answer.
Yeah. Matt Stillman said, what became of Keisha Castle-Hughes? That's it.
We talked about it already. I mean, she's getting the money on FBI Most Wanted. Is that what you said?
FBI Most Wanted.
Yeah.
That's right.
I want to look up what her character's name is called, because I guarantee it is something ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so let's see here. Special Agent Hannah Gibson couldn't be more generic. So I mean, sure, whatever.
Yeah, she had that Game of Thrones recurring arc, but yeah, she hasn't really matched that level of acclaim of like that debut performance, which I think is a shame. I think there are a lot of reasons you could give for that, but I can't speak to exactly why it hasn't been super great for her after Whale Rider. I don't know.
Yeah, she's apparently bipolar. She admitted that, and that might be an aspect to it. But mental health being what it is, I'd like to think that maybe people nowadays can be a little more open-minded about things, but
Yeah.
who's to say?
Yeah. Joey Gentili said Keisha Castle-Hughes was never really able to capitalize on her nomination here. What since this do you think she would have been able to play movie-wise had she been able to capitalize like her fellow Kiwi Anna Paquin?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like something that see the problem with an actress like this in a role like this is she doesn't have the experience, and most people want a little bit of polish on their actors or actresses, and that's why a lot of times these roles are it's hard to break through because they come in and go like, man, you were great in Well Wider. Go. FBI's most wanted. And it takes 20 years to get to that point. It takes 20 years of experience.
Yeah.
So that they want the talent with the experience, and that experience isn't there. So I think that's probably man, that's a tough question. I should have read all the questions beforehand to prep
That's
this
okay.
better.
I mean, I think she could have done more in the indie space,
Yeah,
like Jennifer Lawrence in Winter's Bone, like that type of film, like a pairing up with Deborah Granick, that sort of thing.
great answer.
Yeah, I could have seen her in like horror movies for whatever reason. Like she could do something like that. Like I don't know. I don't know if she wanted like a active leading lady type of Hollywood career necessarily. So it's always tough to say.
I'm playing the Virgin Mary didn't get you very far, so I mean, like, whatever.
Yeah. Yep. Celluloid Siren said Keisha Castle-Hughes was astonishing in Whale Rider and made history in this category. Do you think nominations like her and Quvenzhané Wallis will happen again? And which other child actresses were robbed of nominations in this category over the many years?
Well, I think the obvious answer is it's Tatum O'Neal. I don't know why she's the lead of that movie. Like
Yes.
and she probably should have won for
Yeah.
the lead of that movie, but still, like,
Yeah.
it's I think it's getting better, but I don't think we give kids good enough roles. Like, I don't think like it's kind of like what are the especially the girls, like, you don't think like what's the roles that we miss when it comes to women? It's like they want them 25 to 45, and
Yeah.
that's where they want them, and anywhere before that or after that is not something that Hollywood is that interested in making.
Yeah. I know. I mean, in terms of like other over the years, like, I mean, these are older than
Yeah,
like 13, but like Elsie Fisher for 8th grade, I think,
yeah.
is a good one. Thomas and Mackenzie for Leave No Trace
Ooh, yeah,
is
that's
incredible.
ooh,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
speaking of people who should have been lead, Haley Steinfeld should have been in lead for True Grit. Let's be honest.
100%. Yes.
So,
It's so
yeah,
stupid. Like, it's just like, oh well, they're a kid, so they're obviously supporting. It's like, no, like there's I don't know why these weird classifications. I don't know why they get this in their head when it comes to this. It's not that difficult.
well, you've teed up this next question
Perfect.
beautifully because Dustin Britt said, I love Castle Hughes' nomination. Young performers are often stuck in supporting because reasons. Why do you think that is? Well, you said you don't know, so.
Well, if like I were to have to, like, if you were to say what's the actual reason why kids are in supporting, I think it's just as straightforward as Academy members are adults, and the adults are the leads, and kids being the leads, kids are supporting to adults in life and in movies in their minds. So they can't be in charge. Kids are in charge. What's next is like, it's kind of like it's dumb overestimation, but
Yeah.
like it's just that like adults are voting on this, and they look at kids as kids, and kids are not the leads.
Hmm. Yeah, and I also think it's just a remnant of like the old studio system
Yeah,
where stars were always lead, stars being adults
yeah,
usually,
yeah.
and younger performers and character actors were always supporting.
Yep,
You know,
yep.
it's weird that we still kind of have that
You have to pigeonhole.
set,
You have to pigeonhole these
yeah,
people in certain places. Like, certain
yeah,
people cannot be lead actors or lead actresses. Yeah.
right. Mr. Entertainment said, "Do you think a child could ever win this category?"
Hmm.
Depends on how we define child.
Like,
Maybe like 17.
yeah, it would
But
it would have to be something pretty towering. Like,
yeah.
like you think of like the youngest nominees in these. Like, you think of like Isabelle Adjani, or like even like Marlee Matlin being the prime example of
Yeah.
like she's super young, but it's also like the novelty of like, yeah, great
Mm,
performance, but she's deaf and she's sign language and all this kind of stuff, and like it's part of the role, and you know that it would have to be something like that for a
yeah.
teen. Like you're never gonna give a teenager playing a teenager in just like a good performance. Like an Elsie Fisher is never gonna that like that type of
Hmm.
performance is never gonna
Right.
happen. It has to be something really specific.
Should have happened for Jacob Tremblay in
Yep.
lead
Yep.
actor,
Yep. Should have.
but yep. Yeah. Existential Rock said, which other Best Actress nominated performance would most be improved by a 2-minute montage of them crying while they write an adaptation of the events of their own movie?
Oh man, what a great question. Well, well, as far as the actual performers, Charlize is the best at comedy, so I'll give it to her. But as far as the actual performances,
Yeah.
Naomi, just because it would make the most sense in the
I
movie.
think this is opening up to any Best
Oh,
Actress
any best
nominated
actress? Oh,
performance, not even these.
now we're talking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez, that's well, I think Kate Blanchett and Blue Jasmine is the answer I'd probably end up on,
That's a good call.
because like that suits what's going on in the film, at least.
Yeah.
Like
Very much so.
yeah. Everything else is like,
Um,
who knows?
I mean, like Saoirse Ronan in Little Women,
Ooh.
she's literally writing her
Literally,
story in
literally.
that, so that could very easily be slotted in there. Or, for that matter, Winona Ryder in Little Women, also a nominee.
Uh,
Glenn Close
maybe,
and The Wife. Let's go.
Barbara Streisand and Funny Girl.
Oh, yeah.
That's it's like
Yeah.
I just like you're just trying to find the right tone for it more than anything else. Like you said,
Right.
Glenn Close
Right.
and The Wife would be great, just because
Yes.
you know you're just sitting on the edge of your seat. You're just biding your time, waiting till you get to that year, right? Like
That's literally what this whole exercise is.
how can I? So I want to talk in depth about Glenn Close and The Wife. Let's put in all the legwork to get to this point. And this
Yes. Let me watch 21 Grams and Cimarron and
we're almost there. We're almost there. Just
we're
keep
almost
soldiering
there.
through.
21st century, baby.
Yes.
Yep. Well, actually, Dustin Van said, which of Diane Keaton's fellow nominees would you most like to see reenact her crying while writing montage?
Yeah. As far as if you put that person in the role, I think it'd be Charlize, just because
Yeah.
she would
Yeah.
make it sing in a certain way, differently.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be fun.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Declan Cashin said, should Diane have ended up with Jack or Keanu at the end? If she'd chosen Keanu, do you think her Oscar campaign would have had a sexier hook and maybe been more of a challenger? Interesting theory.
That's yeah. I really like the kind of flipped ideal of that movie, of like Jack's always with these young people. It's like, well, but we're okay with this flipped. It's like, yeah, like yeah, we are okay with it because everybody's so charming. Like I don't know. Like I don't think anything was stopping it.
No.
No.
I think she just had better chemistry with Jack.
I agree.
It's a shame what happened with Keanu in the end.
Yeah.
But there is just an electricity with her and Jack.
I think Keanu Reeves being a doctor who looks like Keanu Reeves will be okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Christoph said, I remember how Diane Keaton's very, very brief nude scene in Something's Gotta Give was a major talking point during the film's release. Did the attention that scene gave to the film help Keaton's awards campaign?
It's one of those get you in the door things. It's like, come for the nudity, stay for the performance. Like it's
sure.
So
yeah.
it keeps the conversation going, sure, but I was really hoping. This reminded me a lot of after it happened. I actually forgot about the nude scene until the got to that point. Reminded me of Emma Thompson in Good Luck to You, Leo Grand. It's just like I was like, man, where was like. And because I remember writing a review about it going like, don't say brave, don't say brave, don't say brave. And
stunning and brave.
Yes.
It's
like, yeah, it's like, oh, this beautiful older woman being naked. How dare she? It's like, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's just to get you in the door. It's not necessarily that I don't like it helped, but there was a lot more besides that.
Yeah. I think the curiosity factor certainly helped, and there may have been actors who did find it commendable
Yeah.
that she had
Yeah.
a nude scene in her 50s.
Yeah.
That's not everyone gets that.
Yeah.
Uh, Jamie said Keaton had received exactly one Best Actress nomination in each of 4 consecutive decades. Is there any 2010s role you'd have nominated her for to continue the streak?
No.
Not for me,
uh,
unfortunately.
I'm not even sure there's a close one.
No.
Like she was just she got comfortable, I think, in the 2000s, and it was just like, okay, I'm good with where I am, and
Yeah.
good for her.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Yeah. Fritz wants me to rank Diane's Oscar nominations.
Ooh. Okay.
Since we are now at the end.
Okay.
All right. Well, my number 1 is Reds.
Okay.
I think that is, yes, a very bold and interesting performance from her where she is challenging herself. My number 2 is Annie Hall for obvious reasons. Number 3, I would say Something's Gotta Give. Really like to love all 3 of those. And then number 4 is Marvin's Room, which I don't particularly care about.
Yeah. I have not seen Marvin's Room, so I'll exclude that one. But mine would be Annie Hall, Something's Gotta Give, and Reds. I do think she is really good in Reds, even though I don't love that film. But
yeah, that's okay.
But no, I do think she is very, very good in that movie. I cannot imagine Marvin's Room ever getting above any of those 3, though.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Yep.
Jimmy said recast Diane's 4 nominations with her contemporaries of the times.
Interesting. Which times?
The time that they came out.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Lead us off. This is.
I'll do mine. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Annie Hall is really tough because like that's literally written for her.
Yeah.
So like I don't know how you do that. I just went with Shelley Duvall because she's like quirky,
Sure.
within the Woody Allen universe too. Like that makes sense to me. For Reds, I just went with Ellen Burstyn. Seems like something she would do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that one.
For Marvin's Room, I went with Sissy Spacek, and for Something's Gotta Give, I also went with Sissy Spacek.
I like I like the idea of Susan Sarandon in Something's Gotta Give. It's a different type of movie, but like that
it is.
It's a different type of movie because like she has the level of like you don't need
she's
vampy and you don't need sexiness in the role.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, that'd be interesting. I was gonna say Glenn Close for Marvin's Room, but I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Oh, brother. Get out of here.
Throw in Jessica Lange and Reds.
Oh, I like that better than mine. So good job.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And how do you even recast Annie Hall?
Yeah, it's one of those like you said. I was thinking maybe like I don't know, like a Jill Clayburgh.
Sure. Yeah.
Like that's
similar type. Yeah.
Like you said, it's a 1-on-1. It's Diane Keaton and nobody else.
All right. Well, Andrew Carden said rank the performances by leading ladies in Nancy Meyers directed films.
Ooh.
So we got Lindsay Lohan in The Parent Trap, Helen Hunt in What Women Want, Diane Keaton in Something's Gotta Give, Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet in The Holiday, Meryl Streep in It's Complicated, and Anne Hathaway in The Intern.
Well, I'll defer to you to start.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go 1 to the bottom here for my ranking. I am very serious when I say this. Number 1, Lindsay Lohan in The Parent Trap.
Yes. Okay.
What she accomplished in that dual role, I remind you, is incredible.
Okay.
That is one of the best, speaking of child performances.
Yes.
That should have been a nomination. Number 2, I'd say Keaton in Something's Gotta Give. I think that's the ideal like Nancy Meyers type of role that when you think of that in your mind. Number 3, I would say Meryl and It's Complicated. Good work for her. Number 4, I would do Anne Hathaway in The Intern. Solid medium. Number 5, I'd do Winslet in The Holiday. 6, Diaz in The Holiday. And then number 7 would be Helen Hunt in What Women Want, who is just not really factoring in for me.
Yeah. Well, I will have to precursor this by seeing I have not seen The Holiday. Or excuse me, I've not seen The Intern. I have seen The Holiday. What am I thinking? So I can't speak to Anne Hathaway. But I will have Keaton one. I do agree with you. Lohan is tremendous. She's my number two. Yes. I did a podcast with our friend Chelsea on the Parent Trap,
Uh-huh.
and that was a very
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep.
was a high point. Like she is, it's you're right. It's not only it's a child performance that is two different performances, two different types of performances, accents, like everything about it's pretty great.
Yeah.
I'll have Winslet in the Holiday third, Meryl fourth, Diaz in the Holiday in fifth, and then Hunt sixth. Though I do like
Yeah.
Helen Hunt in that movie.
Sure. Savannah said there have been 3 acting nominees from Nancy Meyers projects, Goldie Hawn and Eileen Brennan in Private Benjamin, and Diane Keaton here. Are there any other Myers films that you would have given acting nominations to?
Yes, you would,
Well,
wouldn't you?
The Parent Trap. Lindsay Lohan, baby.
I
Um,
also think Natasha Richardson is pretty great in that movie too.
ugh, yes,
Yes,
love her.
yes.
And I also don't know if I would nominate him, but I'm just gonna throw this out there. Robert De Niro is so good
Really?
in The Intern.
I I
Yes.
I, I can't get behind anything Robert De Niro has done since the year 2000. So it's
Well,
hard for me to.
that's gonna be one of them for you.
Okay.
Just you wait.
I have to catch it then.
Not to overpromise,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. A. Aria Pisada de Copacabana said, how was Samantha Morton nominated for lead despite appearing so little and not being nominated for almost anything during the awards season? And how did Keisha go from supporting at SAG to leading at the Oscars? And how did they both manage to stop Scarlett? Wow. Mm,
Well, one, I think Scarlett was, if she was going to get nominated, it was in supporting. I think,
yeah.
which is equally stupid.
Yeah.
She's not a supporting in that role at all. But so that's one. Two is like they just saw Whale Rider and like she's in too much of this movie for her to ever be supporting.
Mm-hmm.
And then why Samantha Morton wasn't supporting is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I can't say for the studio politics of all that kind of stuff. Like it is a British production or it's an Irish production, excuse me. So like I understand like they have their idea of what Samantha Morton is correctly, and they're like she's the
Yeah.
lead, and so it was campaigned that way. As far as while they were able to break through, I don't think they were fighting against. I don't think they were against Scarlett Johansson. I think they were against Evan Rachel Wood and Uma Thurman, but I don't think Uma
Yeah.
Thurman was ever really in the conversation either. Anyway, but
Yeah. I mean, also just to speak to why they both got in, I just also think they both have such emotion and heart
yeah,
and like an easy rooting factor
yep,
to both of them.
mm-hmm,
And also, In America was a SAG Ensemble nominee,
yeah,
so there was clear love there. And I think if you compare that to something like 13 or even Cold Mountain, like there's just a warmth to both of them that I think
yeah,
really gave them a boost.
yeah.
And like we were saying, I also don't think it took many votes to get in
Nope.
after Charlize and Diane probably got most of them.
Lower that
So
threshold. Yep.
Joey Gentili said, does Sammy Morton have 2 of the most forgotten noms in the last 30 years?
Sweet and Lowdown, yes, without a doubt. Like I forget that.
Yeah,
Like
I know.
as far as I don't view In America as the forgotten nomination. I forget Naomi Watts was nominated for 21 Grams of this now of these ones. I don't like as far as two-time Oscar nominee Samantha Morton. It seems strange, but I mean the other Emily Watson nomination is always kind of the one like.
Yeah, I
the
mean, she is good in that, but I understand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Hillary and Jackie has
Hillary
not
and Jackie
lasted in the
is the
culture.
one. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's up there.
yeah. I think in terms of like someone with multiple nominations over the past 30 years, she unfortunately would be one of the least remembered, or at least rewatched,
Yeah,
all these years later.
yeah.
But
It's okay.
yeah,
Like
yeah, it happens.
I'm glad she has 2 Oscar
Um,
nominations.
of course, yeah. Ben Roberts said, would you have nominated Morton for any subsequent performances should she have gotten in for Minority Report?
I do like her in Minority Report. 2002 Best Supporting Actress is a bit of a quagmire. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know how you break into that. Like,
yeah,
but outside of that, like, I thought she was pretty incredible. And She Said, I thought
her one
her one
scene. Oh my
scene,
god.
she blows the doors off the place.
I totally agree.
But that's the big thing. Her being in the whale didn't help, but
Ugh,
I
that
mean,
was not good.
that was not good. But
Yeah.
she's so good in She Said. I think I would have nominated her
Yeah.
in She Said. I think.
Yeah. I think I might agree with that. I mean, that was 2022, so
Yeah.
there was wiggle room.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Yep. Good
Uh,
way to put
Joey Gentile said, Naomi Watts was a woman robbed. I
it.
still, for the life of me, cannot imagine being a voter and not checking off her name. In a world where this wasn't such a slam dunk, I truly feel this would have been a battle of Watts versus Keaton. Who is the versus if Theron wasn't there?
That's interesting because I think if Theron's not there and you have some other fifth nominee that's not really in the conversation, I think this is you know what? Maybe we do need to give Diane Keaton a second Oscar. And I think it's probably pretty easy for her. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see a world where they give it to Watts. Like, I get a makeup nomination, a makeup win seems funny. Like, they don't do that very often. Like the Jeremy Irons situation is one of the few where they're like, we didn't nominate you or give you the win for the right thing. We're going to nominate you and give you the win for the wrong thing. But it happens occasionally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it is probably Watts versus Keaton ultimately there. I think whoever the fifth nominee is in place of Theron probably isn't competitive.
Probably not.
And it's possible that Naomi is seen as the heavyweight contender compared to Diane. But
yeah.
I kind of agree, though, that like in the sort of tradition of like a Helen Hunt, Gwyneth Paltrow type of thing, I think Diane could easily have slotted into a win like that.
I think so, too.
Christoph said, does the Academy hate Naomi Watts, or why does she only get nominated for an Oscar where her character suffers horribly?
I think I feel like Naomi Watts she got Mulholland Drive and everybody's like, cool, that's the perfect role for the perfect actress at the perfect time. And they haven't figured it out since. Like,
yeah,
like she never seems like she's in like, if you look at her filmography, you're like, where are her great performances? You're like, Mulholland Drive, I Heart Huckabees, and that's it. Like, and they don't really know what to do with her. Like, I think her talent exceeds her choices. I don't know who's to blame.
The things that are offered to her.
Yes, that's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I just think that's just her career to some degree. Like when you say like, oh, where her character suffers horribly, like that's just the kind of character she plays a lot.
Yeah.
I know she's done some comedy, like you pointed out, but she just does a lot of roles where her characters suffer. So, I don't know if the Academy has much choice, but if they are going to nominate her, usually her character is going to suffer.
You don't feel like she was snubbed for the Book of Henry?
I have not seen that particular film.
I have not either, and I won't. But okay. It's one of those things. Like, she's been in a lot of very popular stuff. Like, oh, I forgot Loose. Oh, Loose is so good. She's so good in Loose. Oh man,
maybe that should have been a contender.
That should have been the one.
Yeah.
Yep.
King Kong, maybe.
Probably not.
Anyway. Top Dog Bottom Dog said, Sex and the City aired its finale 1 week before this Oscar ceremony. Cast these 5 actresses in the roles of Carrie, Samantha, Miranda, the other one, and the 5th main character, the City of New York.
Wow. I'm by no means not the most versed in Sex and the City, so by all means, I'll let you explore that.
I'm going to say Charlize is Carrie.
Sure.
I think she has that lead energy.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put Diane in the Miranda role.
Okay.
I can see that for her. Naomi Watts, I'm going to make her be like that sex pot Samantha role. I think she could have a lot of fun with that. I don't know where like Keisha fits into this. Like, I don't know if we're like etching it in time of being 13 or like...
Let's say for the sake of safety, she's grown.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we'll make her be the other one, aka Charlotte. And Samantha Morton is the City of New York. Her range, she's the whole city.
She's an Irish woman playing the City of New York. She could do it. She'll figure out a way.
She could do it. Yep. Alicio said, if you could have included one of these films in the Best Picture lineup and one in the Director lineup, which would you have chosen?
Good question. I get In America in picture, and I would put whale writer and director, I guess, if I had to pick a different one. Though,
Hmm.
like, kind of throw a blanket over monster whale writer and something's got to give as far as directing ability. Like they're all very
Yeah.
astutely directed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going something's got to give and Nancy Myers
Ah,
combo.
nice, very
And
nice.
throw in Jack Nicholson in Best Actor,
I
and we'll
yeah,
have fun.
I'm fine.
Or at the very least, screenplay. Like, why is the screenplay not nominated?
Yeah,
How about
it's a
that?
sharp screenplay. Give me
Yeah.
like I said, give me knock out Renee Zellweger and give the statue. Give the fifth Oscar for Frances McDormand is supporting actress for Something's Gotta
Yeah.
Give.
Or Melissa Leo in 21
Yeah,
Grams.
there you
Why
go.
not?
She's the only one
You know
of
what?
that entire ensemble that I'm like, you know what? She didn't deserve. She
Yeah.
deserved more.
Yeah. This might be a long one. We don't have to dilly dally on
Okay.
this, but Gordon said recast these 5 roles with actresses who have never been Oscar nominated for acting.
Okay. Lord. Like you said, could be there'd be a lot go in there. Like no Oscar nominations.
Yeah.
Give somebody the role. Oh geez, I can't
Yeah.
even think of who's not nominated now.
Yeah, these always take me a little bit, so I
Yeah.
had to write these down
Okay.
to really uh I mean, Whale Rider, I'm just gonna say another unknown. I'm
Yes.
not gonna like
Yes.
cast
Good
anyone
call.
known for
Good
that.
call.
For Something's Gotta Give, I went with Christine Baranski.
Ooh, I like it. I like it.
She could very easily do that.
Okay.
For In America, I did Katrina Balfe.
Ooh, very nice. Give
Yeah.
all right. Actually, I would say Aisling Bay, from Living with Yourself. A really awesome
Wow.
Irish actress. She has that like sort of she has maternal comedy, but it can also like I really like her performances and everything I've seen.
Okay. Very cool. 21 Grams. I don't know if I want to subject anyone to that, but Lily James.
Somebody
That's what I went with.
that's yeah. How about I'll do the equally anonymous Lily Collins.
Wonderful.
Just to sure.
Any Lily.
Yeah,
Maybe not Gladstone.
sure. Probably not.
She's
No,
nominated,
absolutely not.
so she doesn't factor into
Good.
this.
Good.
Yeah. For Monster, that is really tough. I don't know why I landed on this, but I I said Sarah Paulson.
Wow.
Yeah,
I,
I have no idea. Like,
I have an actual good one. Another statue.
okay.
Sorry.
Shots fired.
Elizabeth Debicki.
Oh boy.
Just
Wow.
like that seems like yes, Eileen Wuornos would be a lot taller, and
Yeah, I
she,
was gonna say.
but still, that'd be my answer for her.
Very good. Chelsea has obligatory survivor questions.
Of course.
Who wins? Who dominates challenges? Best social game? Best strategy? Who would you want on your tribe? Who goes on to appear on every other reality franchise? uh, this is a tougher one than usual, I must say.
Yeah. Um. So we're putting it in the terms of these characters. Okay.
Characters. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think the winner is Samantha Morton because she survives.
She is a
She
survivor.
just is a
Yeah.
way like she figures out a way to go through. Diane Keaton,
True.
obviously the most tearful confessionals.
Oh, yes.
Obviously. Keisha Castle-Hughes is she's the goat that comes to the final three because she's underplaying everything. Nobody views her as a threat, even though
I could see her being a little crafty at challenges.
little
though,
crafty at
once in a while.
challenges. Yes,
You know. Yeah.
Charlize Theron, day one kicked off, because they're like, wow, this person's terrible. We need, and then
little unhinged. Yeah.
and then Naomi Watts is the one where they keep her a little longer than you expect her to, but then is voted off unanimously.
Yeah. I think you nailed it. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Who goes on to appear in other shows? I mean, I'm sure Eileen Wuornos is good television.
Oh,
but,
yeah. Yeah.
I think this is a little tougher than usual.
Probably
but I'll say Erica.
Yeah, me too. I was gonna say
Diane Keaton.
Erica because she's got things to press. She's got book tours to take care of, and she's like, you know what?
Right.
It's like
That's
I'll be in
true.
the Traders. Why not? Like,
Yes. Oh my God. Okay. Andrew Carden said, who was sixth? Clarkson, Johansson, Kidman, Thurman, or Wood? Oh boy.
I think it's Evan Rachel Wood, but you could talk me into a number of other people, including Jennifer Connelly. So,
Yeah.
probably I think it's Evan Rachel Wood.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you very casually looked back on this race, you would be like, oh, it was probably Scarlett Johansson in Lost in
Yeah,
Translation.
yeah,
But she was campaign supporting. Not that that stopped Keisha Castle-Hughes, but I think she probably got a lot of votes for Girl with a Pearl Earring, which was also something she was getting a lot of buzz for. But I also weirdly don't suspect that she was sixth in lead anyway.
yeah. I
I
agree.
do think I agree that Evan Rachel Wood was probably sixth. I mean, that combination of SAG and the Globes for precursors, I think, is pretty powerful.
Hmm.
Nicole Kidman was predicted by people on a lot of lists,
Yeah.
but I think that movie underperformed so much compared to expectations that probably not her. Patricia Clarkson,
Mm,
actor's actor, gets a SAG nomination, but I don't think The Station Agent was very well respected, oddly enough, compared to SAG. So
right.
I'm going to say Evan Rachel Wood
I think so too.
for 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just it seemed like that was the coronation nomination. Be like, hey, this person's going to be a big thing, and
Yeah.
um, it was a little surprising actually at the time that they decided to go with Castle-Hughes instead of her. They certainly weren't going to nominate the both of them.
Yeah. That would have been something,
Yeah.
though.
Right.
Yeah. Hi Girls, Hi Louise said, did Scarlett probably get more overall lead nominations than several of these, but split across her two movies?
I'm sure she got. If you added her total nominations, it's probably
Yeah,
surpasses everybody but Diane Keaton and Theron. But
probably.
but
Yeah.
that's them's the breaks.
Yeah, those are the rules. Mm-hmm. Patrick Rivers said, if Kidman would have lost the Oscar for The Hours the previous year, do you think there's a chance she could have been nominated for Cold Mountain or even the underrated Dogville?
I There is no realm of hell where Dogville is ever nominated for an Oscar. It's just
Right.
not. Like
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I appreciate the craft, but there's no situation where that ever happens. So no,
sure.
no, I don't think so.
No.
I think in hindsight, the Academy is like, do I love giving Nicole Kidman it for The Hours? It should have been Moulin Rouge, but we're not going to take it away from Halle Berry, like that type of thing. So I mean, it's the right spot.
I think there was less urgency just in general because she had won the year before, and Cold Mountain isn't really an essential Nicole performance,
No,
especially compared to, Moulin Rouge or The Hours,
yeah,
or not even nominated the others. So,
yeah, yeah, and there like you talked about the urgency. Like
yeah.
there's no urgency. Like they saw Charlize Theron, and like I said, I don't think they expected her to ever be back. I think they gave her the Oscar going like,
Yeah.
this is one and done.
This is a fluke,
This is
maybe,
a fluke,
but
and
still.
they,
Yeah.
but yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
don't think there's a situation.
hmm Ben Roberts said, if Uma Thurman could only get in for one of the Kill Bill films, should it have been this one? If so, who would she replace?
She's my personal winner in this category.
Yeah.
Outside of like, I love Kill Bill Volume 1. And I think her performance is so integral to that, and I would have it for one.
Yeah, me too.
And I'd have her. I'd have personally, I'd have Watts out. But if you're talking about how the Oscars would do it, they would have knocked out probably Samantha Morton.
Yeah, we completely align on that. Yep,
Good.
I think
Okay.
so too.
Yep.
John T said Uma Thurman amassed a lengthy list of precursor support for the Kill Bill films, but couldn't make it for either with Oscar. If the film was one feature-length movie, does she get in here? And should she?
She should. No,
Mm-hmm.
she wouldn't have if it was one movie, because that had been 4 hours long. And the Academy had not re-warmed up to Tarantino like they do now. Like
Yeah.
they go ebb and flow. Like they went, it's like
Mm-hmm.
Pulp Fiction, then down at the tail end of Jackie Brown, and then they just left him alone until Inglourious Basterds came out. So I mean,
Yeah.
there was no that wasn't happening, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think there was just also like a genre bias a little
Yeah,
bit there
yeah.
too.
She
Action,
she she
you know.
she cut limbs off of 100 people. They're not going to give her an Oscar nomination.
Yeah. The ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, If You Nasty, said Jennifer Connelly is a fresh winner and both her co-stars get nominated. In this fluid race, why did she miss for House of Sand and Fog?
Because that movie is another big old fat bummer,
It
and
really is.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's hard to. It's a Kingsley is pretty solid in that movie,
Yeah,
and
he's
and
really good.
and Agudash was like the discovery,
Yeah.
and
Should have won.
yeah, she's incredible in that film.
Yeah.
But yeah, and but like there's not room. There's like it was a busy race, and that movie was way too what it was to be to make the impact.
Yeah. I remember her character being kind of a wet blanket.
Yeah, pretty passive.
And the performance just not being quite as impressive as Kingsley or Shrey Agdashlu. So
Yeah.
maybe
That
that's part of it.
that movie should have been a behemoth, and it just wasn't. Like it was predicted, like based off the book
Yeah.
and the people with it, like it should have been. And the fact that it got two was kind of impressive in itself.
Christopher Perkins said Jamie Lee Curtis got a Globe nomination for Freaky Friday. How serious of an Oscar contender was she, considering Disney got Johnny Depp in for Pirates, which granted was a much bigger film?
It's definitely one of those, like, if the Oscars could redo their whole history and be like, we could have given her a nomination here and there, here and there, here and there.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the opportunities, but I don't think it was ever serious. I don't think there was ever anything that really, it's like, we're not going to do this, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's would have been cool, sure, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think she was like a third tier contender, to be honest. Like, definitely a long shot. She was there, and I remember her getting a little bit of buzz, but probably didn't place in the top 10.
Yeah, I agree.
Still good performance,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Priant said, what do you think happened at Evan Rachel Wood's slumber party when she had to see young Keisha get in instead?
I always am fascinated by the idea of how invested people are. Like, I hear about these Oscar nominees, like, oh, I didn't know it was the nomination day. I'm like, really? Yeah. Because it's like, I know you like me. I'm like, well, it's the appointment viewing of my year of waking up and my long lists. It's like, well, that's me, and I'm not even
the most
involved.
Important morning of the year. Yeah,
exactly. So, I never know who to believe and who actually cares and who doesn't care. And Evan Rachel Wood might not have cared, but who knows?
Maybe. I mean, if she was invested, I'm sure it hurt a little bit, especially at that age. Like, it's tough.
Could be worse. You could have like a camera crew following you around as you watch yourself get snubbed, aka Spielberg. So I mean, like,
yeah, very true.
So could be worse.
Yeah. All right, one more from Joey Gentili. Recast these 2000s Oscar talents and Karen Black in the roles above: Abigail Breslin, Sissy Spacek, Viola Davis, Saoirse Ronan, and Karen Black. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I already said Sissy Spacek and Something's Gotta Give, so.
Give me Saoirse Ronan in America. I don't know how maternal she seems, but I mean, she's
kind of a layup because she's Irish.
Irish,
but
close enough. You know what? Give me Karen Black in 21 Grams. She really do something gonzo with it. Like, I like the idea. Sure. Who else do we have?
Viola Davis and Abigail Breslin. I don't know if either of them can do Monster, but
give me Viola Davis in Well Rider just to switch things up. Yeah.
Wow.
Talk about range. Yeah, exactly. It's insane, but sure. Actually, Karen Black in Monster.
Karen Black in Monster.
And then give Viola Davis the 21 Grams role and see what she can do with it. Like,
yeah,
that's interesting.
And I guess we'll do Abigail Breslin in an American remake of Whale Rider.
Sure.
How about that?
Sure. Yes. A dolphin tamer.
Perfect.
Yes.
No notes.
No notes.
All right. Let's move on to our final segment where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Ben, who was it?
It was Diane Keaton. It was this is not no reason to overthink it. Like it's Diane Keaton. Like it's Diane Keaton, Charlize Theron, and everybody else who was happy to be there. Like, that's just what it was.
Yeah, no arguments from me. I think this is clear cut Diane Keaton. She was always considered kind of like the other person who was locked to be
Yep.
even nominated. And then whenever people were predicting, it was like, unless something crazy happens and Diane Keaton wins, then it's going to be Charlize.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the other three were probably happy to be there. Although there is a slight part of me that is like, is the fact that like Keisha Castle-Hughes, for example, had all this passion to get nominated, and then maybe Oscar voters watched her film then and
Yeah.
really were inspired by that. Could she have gotten into that position? But I don't think anyone would have supplanted Diane in second
No.
with this great comeback vehicle and like, the traditional vote.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the few times you're like clear number one, clear number two. Like this is obviously what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, final question for you. Who would you have voted for from this lineup?
I would have also voted for Charlize Theron. It's an excellent win, an excellent, excellent performance. Top tier best actress win nomination across the board. The Academy got it 100% right.
And I will co-sign that. I will be one of the thousands and thousands of votes that voted for Charlize in Monster. It is just an undeniable win. Congrats to the Academy. This is the first time I'm agreeing with a winner this decade. So good job.
Congratulations. Yeah.
We'll see if we keep that up. Maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah.
Charlize is undeniable. I've already said why.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, Ben, thank you so much. This was such a fun journey through this wacky year.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Yeah. Strange year.
Yeah.
Like we're finally now you're finally through the Lord of the Rings in the background and you can move on to other things. So now other cinema can start.
West.
And what a perfect way to end.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, tell people where they could find more of you on the internet.
I am on Twitter and Letterboxd and Blue Sky and Neb is Ben. Neb is Ben backwards. I am also on Instagram, Threads at neb.isben. I have a website, icecreamforfreaks.com. You can find all of my writings there. Also write on The Film Experience, Cinema Scholars, Movies You Texted About. I'm also guesting on other pods as I'm the David Thewlis of podcasting. I have my own podcast. Yeah, I know. It's self-appointed. Please, my podcast is on Twitter at Target Odd Pod. It is called Target Audience. You can get it wherever your podcasts are available. I invite a guest on, and we talk about a film they are targeted by, and I attempt to get on their level of empathizing with their love. So it's always been a fun. It's been a fun experience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. Shows at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, Instagram at And the Runner Up Is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup_is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. Next week, we'll be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2004, where the nominees were Annette Bening in Being Julia, Catalina Sandino Moreno in Maria Full of Grace, Imelda Staunton in Vera Drake, Hilary Swank in $1 Million Baby, and Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, with the winner being Hilary Swank. She's back. So with that, thanks again, Ben.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.